Goeiedag, good day, fellow South Africans and citizens of the world.
I've been looking around for salvation. I've been looking around for the truth. All around me I see frustration, and I looked all over till I found you. I sit and listen to your stories, and you're telling me, please don't worry. So lot in this world you should know, and love in life is where you should go. If you're looking for somewhere to go, if you're looking for someone to know, if you're looking for someone to guide you, then love in life will guide you.
Goeienaand, good evening, fellow South Africans and citizens of the world, and welcome to tonight's live stream. It's going to be an absolute cracker, believe me. But just a bit of admin first for the Loving Life family. A few days ago, I had a very important video taken down with a community strike on the Loving Life Live YouTube channel. The video exposes the idiocy and dangers behind the mandatory vaccine being forced on us. Later tonight or early tomorrow morning, that video will be up on lovinglifetv.com. It is a must watch. You will see why we are leaving the YouTube Google platform. Tonight we have 4 key people discussing independence in South Africa. Dr. Peter Hammond, Dr. Peter Munns, CapeXit's Des Palm, and Cape Independence's Phil Craig. Independence is a condition of a person, nation, country or state in which its residents and population, or some portion thereof, exercise self-government and usually sovereignty over its territory. And sovereignty over the territory is what has been sought by these independence movements, largely in the Western Cape. Many in South Africa now see this route as the only viable option for the minority groups going forward. They want to extract themselves from the corrupt mess they see evolving around them under a completely inept gangster state. In a word, the people are gatvol. Tonight we will look at the history of South Africa, where it has gone so wrong, and why independence is the only road forward. Let me get our guests on. Here we go. Hi, Peter.
Hello, Scott.
How are you?
Good evening, everyone.
You're
Very
the
well,
first.
thank you, Scott.
You're the first cab off the rank. We got 3 to go.
Good.
Let me get the others on.
Nice to not see you.
No, my streaming software has stolen my cam, I'm afraid.
No, good to be back, Scott. Thank you very
Excellent to have
much.
you on again, mate. Dr. Peter Hammond
Yeah,
is joining us next, so you can have a bit of a chat while I get the other 2 guys on.
Yeah, we like brothers without blood.
Yeah, I know that. Hi, Peter. Hi, Peter.
Good evening.
Hello, Pete.
There we go.
Dr. Peter Munns.
Hello, Peter.
Can you see Peter?
Good evening.
How are you?
Good to see you.
Okay, I'm just getting
All right.
Phil Craig on,
All right.
and then we'll get our final guest, which is Des Palm, on as well.
Hey, Scott.
Hi, how are you going, Phil?
Yeah, good. Thank you. Yourself?
Excellent, thank you.
Hello, Phil.
Hi, Peter. Nice to meet you. And hi, other Peter, who I've obviously met many times. Nice to see you again.
Snap. Yeah.
Well, I have to tell you, all your videos are excellent, and all your audios are excellent. So we're doing a great job tonight. My gosh, have we had some crackers?
Don't speak too soon, yeah. Hey,
Yeah.
Des.
When it's live, you never
Hi,
know,
good
do you?
evening.
Hi, Des, how are
Good
you?
evening, gentlemen. I'm very well, gents. Thank you, and yourself.
Excellent, thank you.
Hello, Des.
Hi, guys. Hi, Dr. Hammond. Hi, Phil. Hi, Dr.
Hi,
Munns.
Des.
Do you all just want to say hi
Yes.
to the Loving Life family? We've got about over 250 people watching at the moment. And it's still early
Hi,
on.
everyone.
Hi to the
Yeah,
family.
yeah.
Okay.
Hello, viewers. Hello, family. Great site. Done a lot of work. Great work for South Africa. And yeah, it's good to have people who are out there seeking the truth, justice, and righteousness.
Absolutely. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go on to speaker view, which means that when you speak, you will actually take up the camera. So if there's someone speaking, if everybody else can keep really quiet, because we've got quite a few people here tonight. I'm going to kick off with a bit of a historical question, and this is aimed at Dr. Peter Munns. Now, is a republic in its current form viable in South Africa when you consider the 13 different nations residing here and the number of traditional leaders, for example, in KwaZulu-Natal alone?
Scott, you know, just from like Dr. Peter Hammond, you know, we're historians. There's no future in the past, but we certainly need to know our history in order to understand the dynamics, the demographics, understand how the history of the country was established. And only then, at that point, can you start having a look at providing for social, racial, and cultural solutions. And I don't think it can be done in isolation, and it certainly can't be done without ignoring the need to obey the will of God as a covenant Christian country. And it's been a wonderful journey of learning and discovery, and I've learned so much from Dr. Hammond over the years. He introduced me to his biblical principles for Africa, and that is really a book that every single Christian in this country should actually have in their possession. But getting back to this history, you know, if you look at Namaqualand and Swaziland and this Leboa and Venda, we've got 13 different cultural groups in this country. And unless you are actually going to put in place a way, and I think this is the problem that the current government has done. They've unlawfully or conveniently ignored the absolute necessity for the social and cultural cohesion. And I think it's been a politics of hate that they've kept the people aside. They've kept them divided deliberately, because that is really, and it's always on the basis of race, or it's on the issues of land ownership. And I think at this stage in our country, there's a bill going through Parliament that speaks of land expropriation, or in fact, not just land, but property expropriation without compensation. And also getting back to that, if we have a look at the history of KwaZulu-Natal alone, you've got to look at, in 1879, you had 13 chiefdoms there under King Ketzwaya. And those, and the largest chiefdom was actually the Dunn family. John Robert Dunn, he was a political advisor to King Cetshwayo. And he was given the largest piece of land. He came from Scotland. His parents did. He was born here in 1834. And he became an advisor in 1856 to King Cetshwayo. And there were 13 chiefdoms in that area. And then, of course, you've got to consider the 13 nations that came here long before the ANC established in 1912. So, but if you have a look at the Portuguese in 1487 that arrived in the Cape, then you had the Dutch in 1630, the Germans in 1660, the French Huguenots in 1685. Then, of course, you had your British arriving in 1795 to 1820. And when we talk about British, you're talking about Irish, Welsh, Scots, including John Robert Dunn's family. And then, of course, the English. And on top of that, then you had the Jews arrive from St. Helena in 1828. You had the Indians arrive in KwaZulu-Natal to cut the cane as indigent immigrants. And that was in 1860. And then you had the first Norwegian settlers and missionaries came to KwaZulu-Natal in 1880. And then, of course, First World War, then a lot of people came here, and especially when the gold and diamonds were found in 1826 and 1836, that's what Britain wanted. That's what Europe wanted, was the gold and the diamonds. But the early Boers, all they wanted to do was farm the land. But unless you take all these things into consideration, you don't know. You'll never understand how the politicians, those people, the warlords, the money lords, and those people who actually are more interested in making money than the, let's say, the welfare of the population. And this is going to be a very interesting chat tonight. But I think that we've taken time over the years. We've got 28 years of meticulous research. And I love Dr. Peter Hammond for, we're on the same page. We're brothers without blood. And, I think that as a covenant Christian country, we have to obey the will of God. We all try and lean on our own understanding, and we will fail. We will fail. If we don't seek his kingdom first, Matthew 6:33, we will fail. And if we're in line with God's will and his word and his purpose, then he will fight for us in whatever battle we do. But we have to do it for his glory and his honor. And then we have to look at the social, economic, political, as well as health and justice needs in the country. And that, I think, is for any political leader, that's a starting point.
Right.
Thanks, Scott.
Right. Peter Hammond. Now, your name was mentioned during that discussion there. Would you like to add to what Dr. Peter Munns has said?
Yes, we've got a great heritage. Of course, one thing to realize is biblically, a nation is an ethno-linguistic people group of a shared faith. And so a lot of people are confused today when they think of nation because we've got a gang of criminals up in New York called the United Nations. Well, of course, they are neither united nor are they nations. And they're just the largest collection of unelected dictators, mass murderers, human traffickers, drug dealers on the planet. So many people are super confused also when you get a country like the United States, which may have started as a nation, but now is more like an empire, and they've got a Pledge of Allegiance, which is one nation under God. Well, none of that's actually true, although, of course, they will answer to God, but it's hard to call a country of so many languages and so many affiliations and religions and to call them one nation. So biblically, if you look at the Great Commission of our Lord Jesus Christ, when he said in the Great Commission, Matthew 28, go into all the world and make disciples of every nation, he used the word ethne, from which we get the word ethnic from. And so a nation, by definition, is an ethno-linguistic people group of a shared faith. South Africa is not a nation. South Africa is maybe a country, but it's more like an empire, actually. It's the fruits of the British Empire. And when you've got 13 official languages and ethno-linguistic people groups in the country, it cannot be one nation. And it's not like the Cape was ever asked if they wanted to join the Union in 1910, nor was the Transvaal, of course. The Transvaal and the Free State were invaded and forced into this Union. So this Union, it's not just a shotgun wedding, it's much more than that. This is an empire. And the last thing South Africa needs is a centralized, controlled type of government. Babylon, Nineveh, Egyptian pyramid style. What we need is decentralization, such as in the Swiss canton systems, where when you've got a country of so many diverse religions, races, national backgrounds, very colorful and cosmopolitan and interesting and fascinating, but you are going to have conflict if you try to force the people together into one organizational mold, as opposed to a unity of purpose with a lot of freedom allowed on the ground. So Switzerland, which has which has German and French and Italian and Romansk, and they've got Catholics and they've got Protestants, somehow or another, they have managed to live in peace, the oldest republic in the world and one of the freest countries in the world, if not the freest country in the world, and they avoided the bloodshed of the First and Second World War, where French, German, Italians were killing one another by the hundreds of thousands and actually millions ultimately, because they had a decentralized system of armed neutrality. And the Swiss model is an example of excellence economically and every other way, because instead of the Catholics or Protestants or French or German or Italian feeling threatened by their neighbors, they have good fences make good neighbors. They have decentralized control where the local cantons have most of the power, almost all the power, and central federal government's got very little power. It's a confederation. And the municipality has all the power, and they have the actual control over the local police, and they have the control over the taxes, and the central government gets very little, and they've got very little power authority. Now that is a lot healthier, where you have a country that's decentralized. So what we are advocating is, considering that South Africa is not a nation, but an empire, and the fruits of the British Empire, we didn't have any say in the matter of this being forced together, a unitary state's the worst possible of all possible political scenarios for South Africa. That's why we do need decentralization, we do need autonomy, we do need self-determination, and we need secession and independence, and it'll be better. And we can be good neighbors, and we can get on with the other countries. In fact, we've already got good relations. If you take the Cape Independence Movement, we've got good relations with a whole lot of other different independence movements, the Kingdom of Zululand being just one of them, who are also moving towards independence. So, yes, I think everything Peter Munns says is vital for us to understand, and it's so important for us to understand that what we're talking about here is national self-determination.
Right. Now, as we got 4 people who are going to be involved in this conversation, I'm going to keep this as a very informal roundtable. I opened up with that question just to get a bit of background to the issue in South Africa, and I thank you so much to both Peters for your perspective on that. So what we're going to do tonight from here on in, it's going to be a think tank. I'm going to raise questions. If you want to add a current conversation, please just raise your hand so that I can see it on the screen. And then once the current speaker is finished, I will then invite you to speak. So, you know, if we're discussing something and there's something you'd like to add, just make sure your hand is raised quite clearly, and keep it up for a little while, because I'm looking at a whole lot of stuff. So I just want to make sure I don't miss your hand. If I do, just as the other speaker ends, just say, you know, I'd like to add to the conversation or something like that. Okay, so keeping on with the historical theme, and I'm going to again start with Dr. Peter Munns. How could things have been done better in 1992 to 1994, given the background of what we just discussed?
I think that it was I was a major in the army at 25. I had 16 years in the military. All right. We had no choice in those days. We just had to go into the army. It was one of those things. But at the end of the day, it was good character building. But if you have a look at the history of South Africa, the politicians have dictated. And when we had 1992, we were totally misled, because you had F.W. de Klerk and Pickwater, who took it on themselves to establish the ground rules. We were misled into believing that the Freedom Charter was going to be implemented and it would be equal opportunity for all. But the history of that is the two communists wrote the Freedom Charter in 1955, Ben Turok and Sandy Bernstein, and they used that to mislead the whites, the African Caucasians, into believing the politicians that all things would be hunky-dory. Now, the one thing that you do is that if you have a look at the history of rebellion and you have a look at the revolution and the communist liberation revolution, that is what the freedom struggle was. But when you have politicians telling me that I've just given 16 years of my life protecting family and community and country, and there were West Germans, East Germans, Koreans, Cubans, Chinese, and then suddenly you have a politician turn around and say that communism is dead and that it all died with the Berlin Wall in November of 1989. That was a lie from the pit of hell. But the responsibility of those political leaders was to ensure that when you have a revolution, irrespective of how bad it is, you have to decommission. Those APLA, Zania, ANC, MK, there was a responsibility on the part of F.W. de Klerk and Pickwater and the Nationalist Party government to make sure that those revolutionaries and cadres and whatever, that there were no firearms. If they were promising peace, then that is what we look forward to. And on the basis of that, then the majority of whites agreed to, let's give it a try. You know, after years and years of border wars and conflict and various racial wars, everyone wanted peace, liberation. They wanted freedom. So it was a lie that was sold to us. It was carefully packaged, and the whites bought into it. I'm not against that, but I just think that the planning and the conspiracy, because also at the same time, you had a political party that had given, let's say, a third of KwaZulu-Natal in the form of the Ingonyama Trust into the hands of the Zulu monarch. Now, that should have also been organized in such a way that the custodianship of that land should have meant that they should have used that for renewable energy, agricultural development. There was no planning in terms of socio-economic growth and development. And as we've seen after 26 years of inept and corrupt government, there was no intention to stimulate the economy or to create a vibrant economy. And COVID-19 is living proof that 34 sectors of the mainstream economy were destroyed over some testemic, over some illusion. So I think it's time for truth. We have to face the truth. We have to shoot from the lip. But going back to 1992, that referendum should have been managed properly, and also to ensure that everyone was protected and that we truly had a democratic election, and not to control the justice system and also the electoral process. As Dr. Peter Hammond said, you've got Nineveh, Egypt, and Babylon. And where you have centralized control and no separation of powers, and you have centralized government controlling the electoral process, you've got 600 political parties in this country. You had 48 contests in the 2019 elections. Was there any change? No. But it seems to be fashionable, or it seems to be, I don't know, it seems to be a solution for everyone to establish a new political party. But unless you make sure that the Independent Electoral Commission provides those free and fair elections, you're going to have a government that's going to control the results, and they just write the results before the elections even start. We've seen that in America.
Right. Now, Dr. Peter Hammond, would you? I saw you raised your hand. Would you like to just add to that?
I didn't raise my hand. I was actually just scratching my eye.
Okay. I saw Des raised his, but carry on with you. Carry on. Would you like to add to that? And I would raise the point of that 1994 document that was signed, which was supposed to give an out for the minority groups if they felt uncomfortable underneath an ANC government. Do you want to just talk about that and the importance of that document?
I think Des Palm should tackle that one.
Okay. Des, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah. Scott, yes, absolutely. The 1994, what's called the Afrikaner Accord, was signed. That document pretty much sits with the same problem that Article 235 has got at the moment, and that is that there's no law that was ever written to underpin it. We know how easy the current government walks away from any form of agreement. I mean, in fact, we can see how very easily they're changing the constitution, which is supposed to be pretty much a solid document which you can't just willy-nilly change. So the Afrikaner Accord was probably well intended when it was done or when it was drawn up. We have to look at, we kind of tend not to look at what happened in 1992 and 1994. Our question is, where do we go to from today forward? And that would be to actually build on the reality on ground level in terms of what our constitutional rights are, what our humanitarian rights are, and to build the support base on that. To us, it is it's good to take cognizance of the facts that what happened in the past. We would not like to expend energy on things that were done incorrectly, because we can never change that. And I agree with Dr. Hammond, the only solution out is to actually gain sovereign independence. Then we can pretty much, and like Dr. Munns also referred to earlier, you have to look at protecting the cultural identity of everybody. That's why we say independence for everybody that lives within the Western Cape. This would be our chance to redo, to kick into place what should have been done in 92 and 94. But that specific accord, I don't think we will get much mileage out of it. So it would be a bit of a fatal exercise to expend a lot of energy trying to justify it or ratify it at this stage.
Right. Okay. Now I'll go to you in a second, Phil. I see you put a little note up there. Before I do, I just want to address the viewers. We've got well over 400 people watching at the moment. Please, guys, remember to subscribe to the Loving Life channel, and be aware that we have a new platform that we are developing called lovinglifetv.com, one word, where we are going to be actually transitioning off YouTube into our own video platform. It'll operate very similar to YouTube, but it'll have a lot more functionality, interactivity. It's going to be quite an exciting platform. And again, the focus will be South African history and what's happening in South Africa. So nothing will change on that side at all. Now, Phil, would you like to add to the discussion on this point?
To be honest, I just clicked the little heart button because I'm in complete agreement with Des. I think obviously the history is very interesting to a point because it helps us understand how we got here. But independence is about creating a new political reality now. That the documents and so on are all useful. But exactly as Des said, I don't think any of us believe that the ANC are going to say, look, you know what, we probably haven't stood by the spirit of that agreement we made 25 years ago. So let's go back and put that right. Independence now is about creating a new political reality on the ground and creating the circumstances in which we can define our own history. I don't think we can look to the ANC for anything. I think to a certain extent, other than in the negotiations, we have to see the ANC as virtually irrelevant in this process. It's about the people of the Western Cape coming together and forging for a future for themselves and creating a reality on the ground that ultimately, first of all, the provincial government of the Western Cape can't ignore. And once we've created the reality within the government of the Western Cape, that then ultimately that we then will have to force our will on the ANC. And I don't mean force it by force, but I think if we are going to look at history, we have to look at the sort of pre-92, 94 era. It wasn't any through the legal routes or through documents that the apartheid regime was ended. It was by the political reality that the ANC and their international allies created created, and we have exactly the same situation on the ground now in reverse, that we have to create that reality that irrelevant of what the Constitution says, irrelevant of what the law says. Obviously we have to stay within the law, but we create the circumstances that we create a new history for ourselves, and I think that's something that we are busy doing at the moment.
Right. Now just staying with you, Phil. A country of many tribes and cultures, like we just discussed, and nations needs racial, cultural, and social cohesion. How can this be achieved with the economic freedom fighters, and in particular Julius Malema, causing such racial division? How can there be a way forward for the current South Africa?
Well, look. So I think we'll draw this line between South Africa. I don't think, certainly from our point of view, we're representing the Cape independence movement. So to a certain extent, whilst we have great sympathy for the rest of South Africa, ultimately we're in a democracy, and the Western Cape is in a distinctly different situation to the rest of South Africa. In that we're the only province that doesn't get the government we vote for. So we're in a slightly different situation. And in the Western Cape, the EFF make a lot of noise, but they aren't really a problem. They've got 4% of the vote, and actually we've seen in recent times, that went actually very nicely when they've come to the Western Cape and tried to make mischief. What they got away with in Senekal, they certainly didn't get away with in Brackenfell. It was quite symbolic. I was in Brackenfell, so at Senekal you saw Malema and co dancing outside of the courthouse, singing "Kill the Boer" when somebody's on trial for killing a Boer. It was utterly unacceptable. What you saw in Brackenfell was Julius Malema not actually even turning up, and the EFF having to come and collect their stage from outside of the high school and move it away because it was no longer safe for the EFF to be where there, and that's the difference of the circumstances. So we mustn't focus our efforts on the EFF if you want to look at the politics of Cape independence from certainly from our perspective. And I accept different groups will have different. We'll all have different paths, and ultimately will complement each other. But as an organisation, the CIAG, our focus is heavily on influencing the provincial government, and therefore at the moment that's the DA. We don't expect the ANC to rescue us. The ANC are a lost cause. We're not interested in the ANC in the Western Cape, whether we like them or we don't like them. The people of the Western Cape voted for the DA. We know from polling that the majority of DA voters want Cape independence. We know that the majority of Cape independence supporters voted DA. So in terms of changing the political reality on the ground, our primary focus can't be the ANC, and our primary focus can't be the EFF. In terms of as a political lobby group, which is our particular mandate, our focus is on the DA. We elected them as our government until 2024. They're our government, and they must now represent the people of the Western Cape and take note of what the people of the Western Cape want. That they must serve us and not the other way around.
Well, we'll talk about the DA a little bit later. Dr. Peter Munns, would you like to add to this issue with the racial division?
Thanks, Scott. I think that, from our research, and I agree with everyone what Des and Phil have also said, there's no future in the past, but we need to learn from it. We're a country of many races, nations, tribes, and, it is, and it makes it interesting. What we've tried to do is to have a look at KwaZulu-Natal, because every single province has got its own dynamics. We also have tried to look at the country rather than looking at, we've studied the history. We also know about Hein Marx and, the ULA and different people who are looking for self-determination. I've worked with many of the groups. When I say worked with them, got to understand their dynamics, their policies, their vision, their ethos, and their mission statements. Right from Saidlander's AfriForum, I spent some time in Bella Bella. So it was actually very good and very important to understand how people think. And everyone wants self-determination. We've also understood that even the Afrikaner folk, the Boer folk, they've divided over certain issues. There's even a Nazi folk. And people are divided in themselves, even over language or culture. People don't forget, it's easy to say, well, there's no future in the past, but we have a history of, the Anglo-Boer War, the tragedy with the concentration camps, and any English-speaking person in an area which is predominantly Afrikaans, you battle. And I had 16 years in the military, so I'm speaking from my own personal experience. But let's get back to this issue. We don't believe that an Aranya is the solution. And also, if we have a look at the Battle of Blood River, now 26 of my own family members on my mother's side, I can trace my family tree back to Haarlem in Holland in 1630 when the Dutch came here. And when they came here, we had 600 men, women, and children that were butchered at Wienen, Bloukrans, and Moorspruit. That was after Potgieter and Retief were killed by Dingaan in 1838 in February. Right. Now, if you have a look at Andries Pretorius, General Andries Pretorius and Cyril Cilliers, now he was in Warm Baths, Bella, at the time, and when the news got to him that of the massacre in Zululand, he could have turned around and said, "It's not my problem. It's not my problem. Just let's laugh it off." That's KwaZulu-Natal. I'm up here in the sticks. I'm up here in Gauteng or wherever it was at that time. And it's not really our problem. I would like to really, and this is what we like to propose, is that we're working throughout the country. We want the groups like yourself, Phil, and Des, and for like-minded people to come together, irrespective of the 4 race groups. We've got 4 main religious groups that also need that social cohesion. So if we want peace, they always say, if you want peace, you've got to prepare for war. Well, we're right in the middle of a war zone. So the quicker people come out of that coma of ignorance and denial that we don't have a problem, the better it is. Now, it's not for me to criticize what can happen in the Cape and what should happen in the 13 other areas, apart from the 9 provinces. Because if you know the structure, the topographical, geographical structure of the country, you've got to take into account all those things. But I fully endorse what you're doing, Phil, because if every person does a bit, life is not a mystery, it's a jigsaw puzzle. And if everyone has at least got critical thinkers and strategic planners, you want that brains trust. You want leaders. The country needs leaders. And without that, we need meritocracy like Taiwan. You need meritocracy, the best leaders, God-fearing, ethical, with a moral compass. You also need pragmatism, the best practices, the best principles and values. Those are biblical principles. Those are there. We have 10 biblical principles for peace and freedom. So getting back to the question, I would say that you've got to carry on because you've lived in the Cape. You understand the dynamics. We're not knocking it, and it's not for me. I'm working with the King. We're working with the Ingonyama Trust. We have a very, very good relationship with the leaders. And we established the Peace Commission in October last year because peace, as Christians, we need to be peacemakers, Matthew 5:9. We also need, if you have a look at the Muslims, Islam means peace. And even Dar es Salaam means the house of peace. And that's exactly what we need. If you look at the Hindus, the word Shanti is peace. Isn't that amazing? And if we follow Jesus Christ, he's the Prince of Peace. And then, of course, you've got the Jews, and they greet you in the name of Shalom. So we had to find a common denominator to get people onto that, to understand that we want peace, liberty, and freedom. That is what we want. And if everyone gets onto that and we start to engage with one another, in other words, we don't compete. We've got a common enemy. We've got a common enemy, and we know who that is. And it's important. I'm also a student of Sun Tzu and the 13 principles of the art of war. It's not about war. It's about creating a situation. And the first principle of the art of war is to win without fighting. See? So I think that where we're coming from, we want a peaceful solution. We don't want a rebellion. We don't want a revolution. And we don't want a racially motivated civil war.
Right.
Thanks, Scott.
Okay. Now, Dr. Hammond, would you like to add to that? I can't hear you, Peter. There's no sound. That's better.
I had muted. Yes.
That's okay.
There's been phenomenal growth this year. We've been encouraged by the tremendous growth, particularly of CapeXit. CapeXit, last year's AGM, now we're talking about 19 months ago, was 10,000 members signed up with a written mandate for independence.
Peter?
Yes?
Peter, we were just talking about the historical side, about the racial division side. We're going to get to the CapeXit
Yes.
and the growth of that very shortly.
Right. Yes, I must say, I think most of us are kind of sick of the racial story that they keep doing up. The race card's about the only thing that the other side can bring up. And that's the whole thing about the Cape Independence movement is we're not interested in the race card. We're wanting meritocracy, as Peter Munns has said. We after giving everyone a fair chance. But this idea that you have race quotas is anything completely unacceptable. So the EFF is not welcome with the racism here in the Cape. And to be honest, the DA has played the race card too many times too. We're not interested in that. We see the future for the Western Cape being on non-racial basis. So I think that's every group that is moving for Cape independence is taking this on non-racial line. And to me, that's the solution. The main solution to racism, stop talking about it.
Yeah. Okay. Now, the reason I'm bringing that up is because we got a lot of people from overseas who do not understand what is happening in South Africa. Now we've covered the history of the background of South Africa. What I'm going to do is I'm going to move on to this whole issue with independence in the Cape. And I'm going to start with you, Peter. What plans do the Cape independence movements have to bring peace and freedom to this country and in the Western Cape?
Self-determination, in a word. It's to campaign and educate for a referendum for Cape independence, for secession, for independence. And in this campaign, there are the different groups working and campaigning and informing and mobilizing. I think we saw a phenomenal example of cooperation where we had multiple groups working together for the march from Cloutierville through to Stellenbosch on this last Saturday. And there you had the Cape Independence Action Group, the Cape Party, you had the Freedom Front Plus, at CapeXit. We saw cooperation from a wide variety, all marching together, same movement, even though different banners, colors, T-shirts, and identities, but unity of purpose. And that's helpful. We've seen a phenomenal growth in the numbers of support, and I think the lockdown this year has particularly increased that. But the vision forward is through education, leading to referendum, leading to secession independence, and of course decentralization. We are working on a number of different fronts. Of course, the Cape Party is working on the political side. CapeXit's working for the referendum. Cape Independence Advocacy Group is working on the marketing side. We've got the Cape Independence Forum seeking to facilitate interactive discussion and cooperation behind the scenes. We've got the Cape Independence Handbook that we've brought out this year, which is also available freely online. So the websites, the Facebook pages have multiplied. The posts, great videos have been produced this year, including CapeXit's Cape Independence Action Group's got some excellent videos. There's a lot of good videos coming out from the march and speeches from this last weekend. So right now, I think our social media presence and activity is high. Activity on the streets is good. There's been workshops this year, and there's no doubt that the enthusiasm is probably greater than ever before.
Right. Now, I have to just take my hat off to you, Peter, because I got a email from you in the last week about the Flame Lily Foundation that you've just established and the work that you're doing there. Tell us about that foundation. I know this is not about Cape independence, but it's an interesting thing that you're doing there, especially with regards to Cecil Rhodes.
Yes. Now, I didn't start the Flame Lily Foundation, but I am a chairman. I've been elected chairman of the Cape Peninsula branch of Flame Lily Foundation. So the Flame Lily Foundation started back after 1980 as the Rhodesia Association of South Africa. Now, it's still a Rhodesia Association of South Africa, but the different branches are called Flame Lily Foundation, Cape Peninsula, there's Transvaal, Natal, and other branches. We each bring out different magazines. For us, it's the Fish Eagle. We contribute to a national magazine, which is called the Rhodesian, the Rosarian, which is the Rhodesian South African. So this is an association of people who lived in Rhodesia, were born, brought up in Rhodesia, or fought in Rhodesia. And so it has multiple levels. One is the preserving the history and the heritage, which is my main focus. There's also the welfare side, caring for those who are pensioners and are destitute and who need help. It is advocacy for people who need their pensions paid. So the Rhodesia Association of South Africa is in network also with the overseas Rhodesia groups, Rhodesians Worldwide, Reclaiming Rhodesia, groups as far afield as Paraguay, New Zealand, and Canada. Wow. What we've done in particular in Cape Town, I was challenged by the older Rhodesians because I'm born 1960, so I was just a bit too young to make the Rhodesian War. I made, my brother served in the Rhodesian Army. I was a high school student in Rhodesia, but my service was in the South African Defence Force and Southwest Africa, Angola, and all that. But I'm now the new generation being asked to take over some of the responsibilities. And in doing so, I've taken over a whole range, including editing of the magazines and organizing some of the websites. And we are centralizing at our mission headquarters a Rhodesia Heritage Library, including the old Rhodesia Information Service 16mm films in their tin cans. And we're digitizing, scanning, getting digital libraries together to share with them around the world. But we've also got a library of about 800 Rhodesian books. That means individual 800 different titles, virtually everything written on Rhodesia, including original things from Parliament, signed documents from Ian Smith. So it's a real treasury and heritage. And to me, that's part of our history and heritage also for South Africa. There are many Rhodesians living in South Africa, and it's an important constituency who, as you can imagine, are all very enthusiastic for Cape independence as well.
Right. Now, earlier you raised the Saturday's March. Now, I'm going to put this question to Phil Craig first. Phil, what was the significance of Saturday's March, and was it a success?
Yeah, I think it was a huge success, and I think probably the greatest significance. I think there's always this movement where there's always this switch over from the digital realm, where you start on social media, but at some point, if you want to put the government under real pressure, you have to put feet on the streets. This was probably the first opportunity to do that. And always when it's the first major march that people are doing together, there's an element of a gamble in there because you're in poker terms, you're calling your hand, you're showing what you've got. But it was a huge success. I think I think we did a couple of things. First of all, we put a really sizable number of people on the ground.
You did.
And we showed that there was political unity. So we must have certainly we made a political statement, which in the context of the elections that are coming up in 21 and 24 will be highly significant. We have to understand that the DA government sits with 55% vote. We know from our polling earlier this year that if they oppose independence, they will likely lose their outright majority. Since then, the Freedom Front have openly come out and declared their support for Cape independence or at the march. So now you're in a situation where you've got at least two political parties and almost certainly a third and potentially a fourth that will be openly campaigning for Cape independence, and which makes the loss of an outright majority for the DA if they take a contrary position for Cape independence an almost certainty. So that's a huge political significance. And then I think we've all recognised there's been always this accusation that the Cape independence movement is white. It's actually a white thing. Nobody else really wants that. And again, we know from our polling, the reality of Cape independence supporters, we professionally polled, 56% of Cape Independent supporters are coloured, 28% of them are white, and 16% of them are black. That is the mix of independent supporters.
Wow.
But nobody would believe that. But actually, you only have to look at the march and ask yourself, and all of a sudden, and it's funny, I've fielded for months,
Yes.
we all have, it's a white thing, it's a white thing. For the first time ever, I got accused of it being a coloured thing this morning, and it was meant as an insult, but actually it made me smile from ear to ear. At the point that all of a sudden it's now become a coloured thing is fine, and the reality is it's an everybody thing. So I think it was hugely significant. I think it had huge political significance, and I think and it was a big statement for a first march, and it certainly won't be the last.
Well, I have to tell you that the Loving Life channel covered it live for over 3 hours, and I have to thank so much Michelle Mullett, who's actually watching this live stream tonight. She's actually in the side chat, and she's part of the Loving Life family, and she did an amazing job. Now, I would like to ask Des the same question. Des, what was the significance of Saturday's march?
Scott, first of all, I think CapeXit is probably a bit of a veteran status in terms of organising marches and protests and rallies and picketing. And we have to congratulate Phil and his team. I think they did a terrific job. And what came through very strongly was that there was a solidarity around independence. Pretty much what we find under Dr. Hammond with the CIF is where when you come into the room, you got to hang your organisation hat at the door and sit around that table and talk about independence. I mean, this is the way forward. And I think what Saturday showed very clearly, with a very, very good turnout of people and supporters, is that we are willing to reach out to one another in the interest of independence. And we've certainly, from CapeXit side, we're very happy with the results, with the memorandum that was handed over. And I think that could be a very good departure point, a very good stepping point to move forward. We know a lot of people were sitting on the fence saying, will people pitch and shall we go and shall we stay at home? However, I think Saturday showed that it's all good. Come out, show your support. If you in your heart and your mind believe in independence, when the next march is announced, come out in numbers and support it. And it's the only way we can really convey the message. Like Phil said, hit the street, and numbers is doing the thing. We find that numbers are doing the thing. We know what number we're sitting on. And it's absolutely mobilizing the people out there and let them understand that, again, it is their right to do so. Don't be scared. I totally agree with Phil. Don't be put off by the ANC and the EFF. They only get legitimacy if you keep on talking about them and when you run scared of them. To us, they're not the issue. We're going for a new sovereign state, a new democracy, and I think let's just forge ahead and take the Crucible March as the base to work from.
Right. Now, do you think that the absence of the mainstream South African media reflects that they don't really want to let the world know that there is this growing movement happening in the Cape?
Scott, I think there was, and Phil can bear me out on this, intentionally there were not invitations out to the media, but we actually had very good coverage from independent media sources that covered it. I think as what we find lately, especially over the last 2 months or so, is that mainstream media is actually taking cognizance of the fact that independence is now something that's not going away. We've had articles and interviews with the Report, which is the biggest Sunday newspaper Afrikaans Sunday newspaper in South Africa. We find ourselves in a lot of Afrikaans newspapers. So from CapeXit side, we know that mainstream media is actually taking note. And they all realize that independence is now an established fact. We must realize that independence is bigger than CapeXit, it's bigger than advocacy group, it's bigger than any organization. It's become an entity on its own. It is growing, and where people, like Dr. Hammond said a year ago, people would have laughed at you and scoffed at the idea, they're now sitting and realizing that this thing called independence is not going away. So mainstream media is actually coming online, and they're taking cognizance of this more and more every day.
Right. Now, I guess what I was talking about is more the anchors and the SATVs and the Mail and Guardian and the News 24, those more English online papers. They don't seem to be taking much notice.
Yeah, I think, Phil, give us your input on that one.
Phil?
Yeah, so look, it's so. Again, I would reflect what Des said. So first of all, look, a big part of our mandate is this, as the CIAG, is to work with the media. So we've probably had 25 to 30 articles published this year ourselves, and we've probably had about 20 or 25 written in response, which whether they're supportive or critical is just as valuable to us. So
Sure.
You know, we have worked very hard to make sure that there's a media narrative. These things do take time. So some of the papers are much more open to writing stories about Cape independence than others. Des is quite right. You know, for us, you know, this was a gamble, and clearly we have to manage our risks carefully. So we made because this was the first March. I'll be honest, we didn't invite many media houses because we wanted to make sure that we could write the narrative. You know, had things gone mediocre, we wanted to be able to present that the way that we wanted it. As it happened, I now wish we'd invited the whole world, but at least we did make sure that we had video and photos. So we had a professional camera crew who'll be releasing. We had the alternative media. The Times Live were there, so they wrote a story straight away after. That was then also published in the Sowetan. We did issue a press statement the next day. Marula Media ran the story off the back of the press statement. Times Live say they're going to run another story. I think, look, we submitted an article which I think the Daily Friend will probably run. In terms of the papers, the Mail and Guardian are normally very good. They run a lot of our articles. SouthAfricaToday.net run pretty well everything. The Daily Friend run most of the stuff that we submit to them, and they'll probably run this. The Rational Standard will run virtually everything we submit to them. News 24 take stuff through gritted teeth, but they do take the occasional piece. But I mean, you really have to work hard to get that one in. They turned down our piece for this year. But then you have other, obviously the Independence News is owned. They're never going to cover that. The Daily Maverick have refused us every right of reply. They've written articles where they've directly criticised us. We've even taken them to Press Complaints Committee and got nowhere. So they actively are writing nothing. They'll write a piece. So and funnily enough, the one that's quite bizarre is Politics Web just refused to get engaged, where you would think this would be absolutely up.
That's crazy.
But I mean, it is crazy. But these things are just an ongoing battle. And as I say, we have got 25 to 30 stories out in the last 6 months, and that's a very significant,
well done.
A significant number. And there'll be there will be news of this March. There's no question. So we know there's going to be at least 4 or 5 stories, and perhaps more. So yeah.
Well, we've had about 10,000 views of our coverage of that march since we put that video up. So that's got a substantial amount of coverage, and obviously more marches is the way to go ahead.
Sure. Look, we almost certainly we haven't discussed it on the Independence Forum yet, so we'll discuss that with all of our colleagues. But I mean, we are already thinking in terms of the next march. But people must also understand it's marches like that don't just happen. It's an incredible amount of hard work that goes into and a hell of a lot of money to pull something like that off. You don't just post it on social media and turn up the next week. We started about 10 weeks in advance planning that march, and it cost us a sizable amount of money, and we obviously will have to we probably have enough raised for the next march already, but obviously we'll go back to our fundraisers and we'll start talking about the next date. And I agree with Des, I think having had, this was a lot of people sat on the fence, and I think come the next March and people have seen what fun it was, and for people that were there, there's nobody that just wasn't totally amazed. And in fact, at the end of the march, all of the police that were policing us were asking for flyers and information and where could they go to the website. Pretty well. I think Stellenbosch was taken by storm, and it's amazing how many people still don't know independence exists. And I think what we've done is, and it's going to be a gradual process, we've taken that symbol, that flag that we're using, all of a sudden there's a visual representation when people see there's a couple of different versions, but if people see that red, white and blue, all of a sudden you don't need to say anything anymore. That's the value of a symbol. It just screams, and people have seen that for Cape Independence. And once that starts to get there, we've now got car socks made up, we've got stickers, we've got face masks that you probably saw a lot of people wearing independence face masks at the march, and those things are going to be doing the rounds, and all of a sudden we'll just be perpetuating this story. So this was round one, and there's going to be a lot more marches to come for absolutely sure.
Sure. Now, Dr. Munns, is there something you'd like to add to this part of the discussion?
No, not at this stage, Scott. I think it's tremendous, that, as I say, there is a lot of support. And I believe that, as I say, every single province has got its own particular dynamics, opportunity, we need that independence, we need that freedom, we need that liberation. We fully concur, and if it's working, for the people in the community, then that's exactly what we want, and we want that cross-pollination as well with all the provinces, because I think that. We have a Department of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs, COCTA.
Yeah.
We also have a Department of International Relations and Cooperation, DIRCO. And those are either brain dead or they're in a coma, because there's not a lot going on. There's not a lot being done. And if the government's not doing it, then it's people like ourselves, like-minded, concerned, thoughtful people, as Margaret Mead said, that don't doubt for a moment that a small group of thoughtful, committed and concerned people can't make a difference in the world, because it's the only thing, in fact, that you can. So I think it's very important that people like ourselves, we should stop competing with one another. We should start working together in collaborative cooperation, certainly in reforming the justice system, because that needs a complete overhaul. And then, of course, we need to work in a spirit of cooperation to make sure that the rest of the country is working together to achieve the same thing, common goal.
And I just have to say I was thrilled to see Freedom Front Plus at that march. It was absolutely extraordinary with their big banners. Now, Dr. Hammond, is there something you'd like to add to what we've just been talking about?
Yes, I think we should also really acknowledge the tremendous pioneering work that the Cape Party's been doing, because Jack Miller's father, Tim Miller, was advocating Cape Independence movement and the Cape Independence Party already back in 1993. But there's no, and the Cape Party, since 2007, for 13 years, Jack Miller's been often alone out there, waving the flag for Cape Independence and doing a lot of the groundwork. And from what I could see from the pictures, there's no doubt that the largest group of people at the march were Cape Party T-shirt wearing supporters. So there's no doubt the Cape Party's an idea whose time has come. Yeah. And the fact that there's so many groups that are now supporting Cape Independence, just as a tribute to them. And so those who labored long with very little encouragement in the early days, we should really acknowledge. And I'm sorry Jack's not with us tonight. I believe he had something else on. But, I think very well done to everyone involved in the whole project. There's nothing like boots on the ground. It's said 5% of the people make things happen, 15% watch things happen, and 80% don't have a clue what happened. Well, we need to be more of the 5%, the people who make things happen. And there's a lot of people out there who've gotten encouraged, thinking, I thought I was the only one. And they're encouraged when they see us put feet on the ground and boots on the road and lift the banner high, literally, as was done on Saturday. I think that really means a lot. People need encouragement and they need hope. And during this lockdown lunacy of 2020, a lot of people had given up hope in some ways, and I believe the CapeXit, Cape Independence movement has really lifted people's spirits and given hope for the future.
Right. Now, I've got another question for you, Peter, and that is, many are asking why there are so many different groups advocating Cape independence. Why don't they all just join together to form one party?
Well, each of the groups has their own purpose and focus, and because of the multiplicity of demographic realities in the Cape, it's actually healthy to have many different groups, and also proves that it's an idea whose time has come, because as has been said, success has many parents, but failure is an orphan. So when something is successful, the fact that there's so many groups now advocating it just proves this is an idea whose time has come. And also, we're not socialists, we're not globalists, we're not totalitarians, we're not Marxists, we don't want top-down, we don't want an inquisition, we don't want the Communist Party, the KGB. Organizational unity, or should I say organizational conformity, is not helpful or necessary. What we want is unity of purpose. We want cooperation of allies. And so working together as different groups, each with their own distinct character and image, it's very helpful, because let's face it, some groups are only going to appeal to a certain demographic more effectively than others. And it's extremely healthy that we've got so much diversity in the advocates for Cape independence. And when you've got people from so many, the fact that they can say, this is just a white thing, it's just an Afrikaans thing, this is just an English thing, this is just a colored thing, and as has been well said, no, this is a people thing, and this is a Cape thing, and the people who want to put us in a box can't do it, because CapeXit has a phenomenal appeal to a whole lot of people. Cape Party's got an appeal, and Cape Independence Action Group's got an appeal and a style and a way of communicating, and all these groups are important, and there's others. And when we look at them, it's phenomenal. And I think looking at the carnival atmosphere of that march, it just showed it works. The Freedom Front Plus doesn't have to give up their identity, and the Cape Party doesn't have to give up their identity. We're working towards a common goal where we don't want to oppress and exploit one another. We want the freedom to be left alone, to get on with our work, and then have our own communities run our own affairs. That's all. We're not trying to interfere with somebody else's community. Right. And so I think the very diversity of the Cape Independence Movement advocacy groups is a healthy sign for the future, rather than one big monolithic group which will just stifle dissent and different opinion either.
Well, I have to say, Peter, the job that you're doing as a facilitator is astounding. Everybody who I've talked to, all the leaders I've talked to, just say, wow, what a great man to have, basically facilitating the road forward for all these different groups. Or most, I know there are a couple who don't go, but most of the groups, if I can put it that way. Now, I'm going to put this question to let me start off with Phil. Phil, over to you. What would you like to add to what Peter said?
Well, no, I think I'll just echo what Peter said. It's the same thing. I think we all get asked this question ad nauseum, which makes it important to address. And I think people instinctively think, well, you must all work together. But I mean, we often give the example, if you want to build a house, it isn't going to help if you've got 5 electricians and no bricklayers. You need to have a couple of bricklayers and an electrician and a plumber and a carpenter. And when they all work together, you get a house. And if we look what we've got in the Cape Independence Movement now, we've got 2 political parties now, and I'm sure we're probably going to have more coming on board. We've got a civic organisation in Des that's collecting a mandate and going one route. We've got a political lobby group like the Cape Independence Advocacy Group, who's focusing on political influence and the media, and actually we all complement each other. So if we get an article in the media that suddenly gets read by 30,000 people, they're not going to come to us. We don't have members. We don't have, actually, hopefully those people will find their way to Des and give him a mandate, and hopefully they'll end up saying, well, look, you know what, actually I like what they say, I want to vote for this. And when they come to us and say, well, who do you vote for? Can we vote for you? It's like, well, no, you can't vote for us, we're not a political party, but you can vote for the Cape Party, and now you can vote for the Freedom Front. And so actually we're utterly complementary, and we would be weaker if we were one group, not stronger. We actually have to have this diversity that allows everything. And for people who think there's no unity, there is unity, there's commonality of purpose, but ultimately when we have a referendum, there's going to be one referendum. So whatever differences we might have, and actually it makes absolutely no difference if the way that I think we're going to get to referendum might be different to the way that Des thinks we get to referendum, which might be slightly different to how Jack thinks we'll get to a referendum, because it doesn't really matter. Actually whoever gets there, whoever's method it is that ultimately delivers us there, the rest of us are all going to be right there standing with that person. And if we get Cape independence and it turns out that Des's route turned out to be more effective than mine, I'll be delighted. I don't really care. It's not about ego. It's about getting Cape independence. And actually, so together we're stronger, and and we do collaborate, and so people need to just relax over that and understand that this is exactly the way that it should be.
Right. Now, Des, your name came up a few times there. I'm sure there's a lot you'd like to add to that. And I have to just before you respond. How many mandates do you have now? I know you had 7,000 in March, and you now have over 600,000. What's the figure now? What's the latest figure?
Scott, we're sitting around 607,500, I think, or 500 and odd, over 607,000. First of all, I've got to totally agree with you and reiterate the fact that Dr. Hammond has been walking this road with us for a good time now. We've got absolute respect for him. We see him as a mentor. We obviously always like to quote one of his sayings that says, let the main thing be the main thing. To us, the main thing is independence. And in that regard, I totally agree with Phil. To us, there's value in people going out and sharing the message of independence. It's not who's going to get to the finish line. We've had independence or secessions previously where you had 6 or 7 or 8 different organizations working towards the secession of a country. At the end, it comes down to when you walk in and you pledge or give your support to independence, that is what counts. So I also think, again, that we shouldn't spend our energy on trying to fathom who's doing what and where. Let's stick to the main thing. Let's drive the concept of independence. And it doesn't matter, you've probably got 10 different ways you can drive to Joburg, and independence is pretty much the same thing. We're all going to arrive at the same destination. And what I take my hat off to are the people that's sitting around the table under Dr. Hammond in the Cape Independence Forum. We share a common passion.
Right.
We share the common fact that we want independence as a matter of economic survival. It's got nothing to do with race or language or anything. To us, it goes about economic survival. We've already fell over the fiscal cliff. It's just a matter of how hard we're going to hit the ground at the bottom. So I totally agree with Phil that let's see independence as the goal. And then it basically doesn't matter really who you support. If you support like-minded organizations, absolutely go for it. But people need to spread the message of independence.
Right. Okay, look, I just want to address people watching right now. Guys, I'm going to be getting to your questions a bit later, which I will put to the guests. So look, because we're not talking about them right now, it's just because I've got a format that I'm going through. But I do have a couple of comments that are worth repeating. And Red Sky says, Dr. Hammond's words bear repeating. We're not socialists, we're not globalists, we're not totalitarian, we're not Marxists. And I think that's very important. Where's this one? Yeah, Zip Reaper said over 600,000 mandates. How are they audited? Back to you, Des.
Scott, each mandate we receive is actually a completed registration form. We run a system of registration where if there are any duplicates or we have Superman or Wonder Woman or Invisible Man registering. Some people do try to be funny that way. The system will just ignore it and kick it out. The auditing of this database will be done by an auditing company come the time. So we have one person handling all registrations. It's sitting on a very secure database. And that's why we actually add each Sunday, we add the figure of registrations we received for that week.
Right. Okay. Now let's move on to the next. I'm going to get Dr. Munns to talk on this subject and throw in there. What is the situation about KwaZulu-Natal? Should it secede?
I think that it's got its own particular challenges, like every other province. I think at KwaZulu-Natal is really a bit of a hot spot in terms of the fact that we've got a Zulu monarch. We've got a house of more than 300 traditional leaders. We've also got the largest population of Indians outside of India in KwaZulu-Natal. But I think our greatest challenge here, Scott, is not so much the challenges between the various cultural and ethnic and race groups. It's the inability. There's no infrastructure. Batha principles, and Batha means people first. The people's needs have been totally ignored. We've got 550 squatter camps. You've got 900 informal settlements in Gauteng. The biggest tragedy of the government is that they've ignored. They go for their infrastructural, we know the next 25 years, very optimistic by the government of the day, but they're planning to spend 2.3 trillion in the next 25 years, and they're going to create 1.8 million jobs. Now, if we have a look at the 2010 FIFA Cup, they built 10 shrines to stupidity, 68 billion for 400,000 international soccer fans. And I don't even like the game. But the bottom line is that it costs between 80 and 100 million a year to keep those lights on. So it's about priorities. And getting back to where KwaZulu-Natal is, I think that COVID-19 has really opened our eyes to the great need, renewable energy, project development, agrarian, agricultural, food security and poverty relief has to be the number one priority, certainly in KwaZulu-Natal. And this is where the devil's in the detail. And you have to find, and I think when we started, and it's not punting anything, but we established the National Peace Commission as an oversight committee. We don't want the same mistake as what we had in 1994, where you had a political party that was established in 1912, making all sorts of promises that they're the church of the poor and the voice of the masses. But the first 100 names on the ANC list, the candidates list, were active members of the South African Communist Party. So we were deceived and betrayed.
Yeah.
And we don't want that to happen again. It's easy to say, well, let's establish a political party. But if you don't give attention to the detail, you don't want people to ride in on a political party, and then they've got agendas like we've seen, totalitarian control, socialist ideology. And it is the philosophy of man that has created the problems that we have today, because we've moved away from those moral standards and values. So, yeah, KwaZulu-Natal, we've had 28 years of incredible opportunity to do the research. We can't be fooled, and we're not going to be fooled. And we know that we need freedom, security, prosperity, and justice. So we're looking at specific areas of challenge. And I think that's where we're concentrating. We've got 265 municipalities in the country. You've got 44 in KwaZulu-Natal, and you need people. You need that meritocracy, Scott.
Right.
You need to have those people in place to have the ability to do those jobs, and skilled people, competent and committed people.
Right. Now, is there anyone who would like to add to what we've just discussed before we move on to the next question? Okay. All right. The next question I have is for Phil Craig. Now, Phil, earlier you talked about the role of the DA in, the important role that they would have to play in actually getting this all to happen. Do you want to just talk about the elephant in the room, which is the DA? How do we move their political position on independence now that the movement is gaining ground?
Yeah, look, and I think first of all, let's just give a clarification here. When we talk about the DA, we talk about the DA as the party of provincial government. So this has got nothing to do with whether we support the DA or we don't support the DA. It's just simply a matter of fact that until 2020, look, a referendum has to be called by the Premier of the Western Cape. And until 2024, the Premier of the Western Cape is coming from the DA. So no referendum can be called by anybody else other than the DA until 2024. And thereafter, it can only be carried if the DA are dethroned. So independence at this point in time goes through the DA. That's just a democratic reality because they won the election. I don't think anybody thinks they're not the duly democratically elected government of the Western Cape. So therefore, for us as a political lobby group, it's quite critical. And I think, like we say, we know also from our polling, we have these statistics that 53% of DA voters in the Western Cape want independence, so the majority, and that puts the DA under a fair degree of pressure. And we know that 65% of independent supporters are DA voters. So largely speaking, and that may not necessarily be entirely reflective in the independence movement itself, because perhaps we come from sort of different backgrounds. But the reality is that the independent supporters and DA voters have a large degree of overlap. So therefore, we're talking about the same bunch of people that we need to shift and we need to move. So that all of those things make influencing the DA's position on independence very, very significant, certainly for us as a political lobby group. And more than that, the thing is that often people, you don't notice little changes over time. If you actually go back and look at what we've achieved in terms of moving the DA in 2020, it's absolutely staggering. Most people just don't realise how far the DA have fundamentally moved already, because it's in these little bits behind the scenes. So let's look at what's happened in 2020. If you look back at 2019, I think there was one article carried in the mainstream media about Cape independence, and the DA didn't discuss it once. We're now in a situation where I've said to you, there's been about 60 plus articles in the mainstream media talking about independence, and virtually every single DA leader, Alan Winde, John Steenhuisen, Helen Ziller, Bonginkosi Madikizela, they have all been drawn into discussing ad nauseum independence. At times it's irritating for them. And actually, they also talk and say, listen, that actually they're consistently being asked about Cape independence. So that, first of all, it's now on the agenda. It's on their agenda, and they're starting to feel the political pressure. The Freedom Front coming out would be very significant for them. Then we've got to look and say, during the course of 2020, the DA have formally adopted federalism. Now, federalism isn't independence, but it's a long way away from the unitary state. They've now formally adopted a position of wanting federal autonomy for the Western Cape. And if we go back to SOPA, in the SOPA address, State of the Province address in February this year, then Peter Murray really called out Alan Winde and tried to get him to pursue federal autonomy, and they weren't interested at the start of the year, and yet by the end of the year they've adopted it. And then this may have been missed on by a number of people, but 2 weeks ago at the Western Cape province, the Western Cape DA adopted two resolutions. One is they agreed to fix the referendum legislation to pave the way for the DA to call a provincial referendum. Now, that may well be on federal autonomy, but actually the fact that they are now already themselves passing resolutions at a provincial level so they can fix the referendum issue so that they're free to call a referendum is significant. And at the same conference, and they were moved from the floor. That wasn't moved from the leadership, that was moved from the floor, but it was adopted. they also passed a resolution to say that they would defy the ANC government defy the ANC government where the ANC gave instructions that were either immoral or illogical. So when we start to take all of those things together, then there really has been a very, very significant move in the right direction behind the scenes, and that is the pressure that collectively the independence movement has started to put on the DA. And irrelevant who we all vote for, once we can get the provincial government to be engaged in the independence debate, the debate, that then starts to give it a lot more authority in itself, and it starts to open up the Overton window. Look, I'm waiting to get confirmation of this, but I have been told from two sources recently also that actually behind the scenes they are now openly discussing independence within the DA Western Cape. What they're going to say, I don't know. We're waiting for further feedback on that. So why are they significant? They're significant because they're absolutely a part of the process until 2024 or until the Western Cape elects a different government, in which case the government then elected becomes the important thing. And the progress that we've made has been actually staggering, and far more so than most people are actually aware.
Right. Now, Des, over to you.
Scott, yes. The fact of the matter is that the Premier of the Western Cape said he'll never hold a referendum, and what we must take from that is that he recognised that something is happening on his watch. Independence is busy happening on his watch. Now, we did some time ago send our document called The Road to Independence to Ms. Helen Ziller, and I actually started communicating with her around this, and then she took the federal chair and went quiet on that. However, we work on, just like form follows function, we work on creating that reality on the ground and getting the support in numbers. And we actually work on, let's call it a worst case scenario, where we say that the Premier, if the DA remains in power after 2024, and the Premier will never call a referendum, obviously your next box you've got to tick is to speak to the South African government. Now, we know that the President of South Africa hasn't got the power to call anything but a national referendum. And then you move on to the international arena, where you're now going to use your 1.6 million mandates and get in the situation where form will follow function. We know that in the 1990s, when the ANC movement, their freedom movement, wanted certain changes and certain conditions, at that point in time, the South African Constitution did not allow it. However, they did not stop striving for what they want. And we all know what ended up happening with the government change in the 1990s. So you have to create this reality on the ground. There's nothing, I think, that scares a politician more than the will of the people. And that is the mechanism you must yield, and you must use that to its full capacity. And exhaust all your remedies according to the international law, international requirements. And then the permission of a local premier to us must become a moot point, because if you deny the right of the people who you supposedly represent in the Western Cape, if you deny their right to have a referendum, we fail to see how you can still say that you're sitting in a democracy.
Right, I get it. Dr. Hammond, would you like to add to that? Oh, your audio. Peter, your audio.
I was just trying to get it to behave itself, yes. We were told to mute in between to make sure we don't get background noise. Yes, the ongoing complaint of many people is the ANC will never allow it or the DA won't go for it. But yes, we've seen independence movements around the world where it doesn't matter what the central government thought or even what the local government thought. It becomes a movement of the people. And Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, the Baltic states broke away from the Soviet Union. Slovakia from Czech in the Velvet Divorce in 1993. Croatia, Slovenia as well, out of the Yugoslavia mess. And we've seen secession movements that have been successful, and Eritrea and South Sudan in Africa. And let's not forget the one closest to us is Namibia. In 1990, Namibia broke away from South Africa. They were treated like the fifth province from 1915 all the way through to 1990. So the idea that, well, central government won't allow it, or what the local political party says, they're going to be overtaken by the events on the ground. Now, R.W. Johnson, who wrote the book, How Long Will South Africa Survive? British economist, said that central government will fail inevitably on the policies they're going to run out of money. They won't be able to keep the lights on. They won't be able to keep the water flowing. We've already had how many water crises, how many power failure problems. And so central government is failing. In fact, provincial government has failed sometimes too, such as the water crisis we had a few years ago. And we're still paying 800% water tariffs on this 3 years after the drought ended. So the DA has a lot to answer for in mismanagement, such as on the water crisis. But R.W. Johnson, this British economist, said that ultimately you're going to see provinces like the Western Cape, which is the best run, most likely to succeed, breaking away from the failed state of central government. The more it becomes clear that central government has failed, and then you'll probably see Kingdom of Zululand and others following suit. So we believe this is the wave of the future, decentralization and secession movements, and the centralized government has been mismanaged. Obviously, it's a cover for colossal corruption. So as far as we can see, the central government is collapsing on itself in terms of its colossal amount of crimes and looting and extortion and state capture and its blatant failure. And on so many levels, they're ending up fighting one another as well. Yeah. And so as we see them collapse, and the local government in the Cape, the DA, they might be running the most efficient province in the country, but a part of that is not due to them. It's just due to the fact that the Cape people are just more law-abiding, more high work ethic, and the Western Cape works well no matter who's in charge at this stage. So it's the Western Cape that is going to force the political people, the DA or the ANC, as the case may be nationally, to accept the fact that the Western Cape wants to go free, and there's nothing they can really do to stop it if they're failing in their central task of providing. They're not providing security. In fact, they're talking about, they treat us already like second and third class citizens, and this is why the coloured people overwhelmingly are opposed to central government and supporting Cape independence. And they're treating our property as and the Bill of Rights as something that just doesn't matter. The pandemic lockdown proves this. So yes, as far as I can see, Cape independence is inevitable. Central government is failing. And the question is, do we go down with the SA Titanic, or do we launch out in the Cape independence life raft, so to speak? It's not a matter of choice anymore. I think Cape independence has always been a great idea, but right now it's no longer actually a choice. It's a survival mechanism. We don't actually have a choice. If the Cape doesn't break free, it's going to go down with this corrupt, chaotic shambles of a criminal cabal that is the ANC running central government.
Right. Now, Dr. Munns, do you want to add to this?
Yeah, I think that, from my perspective, and also the homework and the research that we've done, I think that the independent is a great word. It's a great movement. And I think that the potential for other areas where we're concentrating on the peace, and we're also concentrating on things like freedom and security and prosperity and the justice. Before you can start talking about federalism, you've got to get rid of the feudalism and the tribalism and the racism. And there's no law and order. There's no rule of law. We've got a lawless, violent, hostile government, let's say country, and there's no control. You don't have the infrastructural capacity for service delivery. And out of 265 municipalities, you only had 18 last year with clean audits. So you need that oversight committee. 3 trillion rand has been stolen in 10 years, 4 trillion rand in debt, and the GDP has shrunk by 10%. So, and now we've got a government that wants to steal 8 trillion in pensions, and then they want to expropriate. So I don't think that we can waste time running around cleaning the ashtrays while the house is burning down, or rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic. So I think that, you know, where everyone else is running around in circles and coming up with these brain flutters, and I think it's the greatest opportunity now to find that leadership, people who have got critical thinkers, strategic planners, operational people, and get them together, get them around the table, create a brains trust. Exactly what we're doing now, Scott. Find those leadership, the think team, together everyone achieves more. Put the egos aside, leave the baggage and the manifestos at the door, leave the, you know, all this other issue nonsense, and concentrate on those things that have to be done. Forget about referendum. What about impeachment? You're going to lock these guys in a room and throw the room away. Open up Robben Island again and business as usual. You know, but the bottom line, you cannot keep on skating around the issues. I mean, I shoot from the lip. I poke the tiger, I prod the bear, because on my family crest is Omniat Vincet Veritas. Truth conquers all. You can't beat it. You've got to have a good memory. You've got to have a good memory to be a good liar. So it's far easier to tell the truth all the time, and then whether people like it or not, it's no good. But we're not here anymore to please people. If you want to make people happy, go and sell ice cream. But we're not here to sell ice cream. We're here to make a difference in the country, surely. Right. That's what we're here for, aren't we?
Right.
So, yeah, we're pretty passionate. We're fired up, and I think we need this passion. But it's more anguish. It's righteous anger. It's righteous indignation. And we need more people who are annoyed and saying enough is enough. But now let's see what we can do together.
Right. Now, Dr. Hammond, you're working with all these different independence groups, and you obviously know the skills and the capabilities and what they offer. Do you believe that the Cape of Good Hope can become free and independent and successful?
I do, yes. I'm convinced we can, and we have. In fact, the Cape has a tremendous history going back at least to 1652 and, of course, even before. But we've been a constituted, civilized community for centuries. Now, a few years ago, the Kingdom of Zululand celebrated the 200th anniversary of the Kingdom of Zululand. And what a lot for the Zulu people to be proud of, and a great 2-century history. Well, the Cape, we've got almost 4 centuries of our history, and we were a country with our own parliament, meeting in prayer in the name of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ for many decades, long before there was even a house built at what today is Pretoria or Johannesburg. And so nobody should question the cultural, religious, linguistic, religious or community right of the Cape to be its own country. We were. And, well, in fact, 130 years ago, Cecil John Rhodes was Prime Minister of the Cape. So interesting looking at our heritage and seeing what we have been. And there's no reason why we shouldn't be at least as successful as Namibia and more. If Namibia could break away, and they've got a smaller population in the Western Cape, we've got a stronger economy, a bigger economy, a far bigger agricultural base, we've got a strong mineral base, we've got everything we need in the Western Cape to be successful. And in fact, financially, here's something that's quite staggering. Of the money that we're giving to central government in taxes, only 8% is being spent in the Western Cape. So this means that the vast majority of the taxes we pay go out of our province and don't come to us. If we were independent, we could slash our taxes to less than 10% what they are right now.
Wow.
In fact, if we made our country, the Western Cape, uncorrupt and made it well run and efficient by decentralization, we could bring the taxes down, some of us believe, to 1% of our total income. And who wouldn't mind a tax haven like that? So the Western Cape, if we go the way of a tax haven, and economists like Stephen Mitford Goodson and others and BRICS, CapeXit has got their own economic team that looked into this and decided that what I was advocating of 1% isn't even necessary. They're advocating a 0.55%, which is, in other words, 55 cents of every 100 rand is all that you need. Virtually 0.5% in terms of TEAL, total economic activity level, will be adequate for maintaining everything needed in the Western Cape, and we'd probably be able to bring that down. What investor would not want to invest in a place
Absolutely.
that offers less than 1% tax. This is the sort of recipe for destroying unemployment, creating full employment, massively bring in investors, tourists, and many others. So yes, I believe the Western Cape, cut from the tumor of this cancer government that is just like a parasite, leeching the blood out of us, giving us nothing but infection, corruption, and crime in return. They are the definition of politics. Poly, many, ticks, blood-sucking parasites, politics, many blood-sucking parasites. If we can free ourselves from the corruption of the ANC, and I spell it small c, capital ANC, small ER, because the middle letters of cancer is ANC. And the ANC is a cancer on this country. They are corrupt as anything. The C stands for corruption, the N stands for nepotism, and the A stands for anarchy or arson, whichever one you want there. We don't, and abortion for that matter. We don't need the cancer government. We don't need the ANC. And to be honest, we don't really need the DA's 800% water tariff and so on either. So, or their race card. What we need here is freedom for the Cape. And yes, I'm absolutely convinced it can work. It does work. The Cape is a phenomenally resilient area. And, you know, if you can operate on water restrictions, as we have severe water restrictions with the phased load shedding or power failures, and on level 3 lockdown, then, you know, you can manage anywhere in the world. And the people of the Cape are very resilient, can do, make a plan people. And if we can be broken free from the shackles and from the corruption of the central government, I think the Western Cape, the Cape of Good Hope, will be one of the most successful countries and economies on the planet.
I couldn't disagree with you. I think it certainly will. Now, let me ask Des. Des, what's your view on this?
Scott, I absolutely agree to the fact that the Western Cape has always governed itself. Since the days of the Batavian Republic, we've been governing ourselves, and at the moment, in fact, we are the only province that's got its own constitution, apart from the central government constitution, the South African constitution. And I totally agree from an economic point of view. Dr. Hammond is absolutely right. We always take 2017 as an example, where we contributed 632 billion rand to the national GDP. And indeed, if we're lucky, we get 10% or 8% back. In that specific year, we received 50 billion back, but 10 billion of that was a grant with special conditions. So we, in fact, received 40 billion. Now, if you look at the current financial year, I think the Western Cape government, the budget for all services included is around about 76 billion. So you can increase your local budget by about 9-fold. And again, Dr. Hammond is spot on. We proposed the teal system, which works on 0.55% the funds going into accounts. Our economists and the people that started the teal system or devised the system reckons that you can increase your tax net by 27-fold.
Wow.
Now there we're only looking at two factors. We find and CapeXit's approach to independence is holistic. I mean, we've been establishing advisory panels on education, water, and energy. We've, like Dr. Munns referred to, we also started working with oversight committees on a municipal basis, where you find retired people that was involved with a certain municipality has now retired and they're sitting with 30, 40 years of experience. So they've got a very intimate knowledge of what's going on in that municipality, and we're supporting the establishment of such oversight committees. But absolutely, I mean, economically, we find that we're now talking to both companies and individuals internationally, who tells you outright, at the moment, South Africa, I think we've dropped below a double junk status in terms of our credit rating. We're sitting at the point where our national debt has, I think, surpassed our GDP. We can't even service our debt. If any country can make 500 billion rand or something disappear from an aid fund, which was intended for COVID, there's no way that you can justify that. That open thievery and corruption will never end. So we've looked at the economic side of it, and apart from things like teal, apart from things like retaining your funds and sending it up north to Pretoria, Because at the moment we sit with a one-party state, and we have Pretoria making decisions for the Western Cape. They don't even know what's going on here. It's all about money. It's all about how much you can steal. So we've got individuals and corporations internationally that tells us outright, the moment you gain your independence, we will be knocking on your door for investments. We've got tremendous people on board. We've got people that has doctorates in alternative green energy using ocean currents and trade winds. That's the caliber of people that we're attracting, because they all support the notion of independence, and they agree that the only way you can survive from an economic point of view is to cut the tie with South Africa.
Right. Well, I've got to agree with you. It's crazy when you've got Dlamini Zuma, who heads up COGTA, basically running the country under its current lockdown. I mean, that just shows you what a crazy situation we have. Now, Phil, over to you. What would you like to add to this?
Look, to be honest, probably not a lot. We as an organisation tend to steer away from policy. Not that we don't have plenty of people capable of developing policy that come to us, but actually fundamentally we try and keep a focus on, we try to build as broad a coalition as possible, so that, because for us we feel that getting 50% plus one in the referendum is absolutely critical, and the more that you take Cape independence plus something else, the harder you make it for yourself to get over the 50% plus one. That doesn't make it wrong, actually, and I don't want to be divisive, so look, I'll just be careful in my thing, but our economic data. So first of all, let's on what we agree on. I think it's absolutely beyond question that the Western Cape will be an economic success. We've engaged with a number of senior economists, and I think that's beyond doubt. I think we should be, from our perspective, I'm always wary of some of the economic data that's put out. Look, we've done a lot of work on numbers, and I don't necessarily agree with the numbers that are sort of put around. I think they're probably there's probably some errors in those things, but it doesn't matter. The principle is, and the point is, whichever way we do it and however we do it, I think we're all in complete agreement that the Western Cape will be an economic success, and all of the economists who've been asked on the question have agreed it's going to be an economic success. And actually, interestingly enough, even the opponents of independence, if you ask people, the political opponents, well, look, how are you going to keep people out? Is actually an admission of just how successful an economic, an independent Western Cape's going to be. I think there's a recognition that, hang on a second, you can have this huge problem because you're going to do so well that everybody's going to want to go there, and that's an admission in itself. And therefore, the detail becomes less important at this point in time.
Right. Now, I'm going to stick with you, but I just asked Dr. Munns, is there something you'd like to add to this discussion, Peter?
No, not really, Scott. That pretty much sums it up.
Okay. Now, let's go back to Phil. Phil, what happens if the ANC, because we've just been talking about the value of the Western Cape to the Union of South Africa, what happens if the ANC refused to accept a successful vote for independence?
Well, look, there's only two provinces that pay into the system: the Western Cape and Gauteng. All other provinces are net users of funds. So that is the case. What do we do with the ANC? Well, look, I think there's an awful lot of debate on there, and I don't think any of us truly know what they're going to do. I am relatively optimistic in terms of but I will definitely be not the normal. So in other words, I think if you speak to 100 people, 95 of them will have a different opinion to me. So therefore, I'm just going to give my own opinion. But my guess is the same as anybody else's. My instinct is that if we do this thing properly, we actually end up just taking the ANC out of the equation. And I think the ANC is becoming increasingly dysfunctional.
Right.
And I don't think they're going to have the resources to really do this. I don't think at an international level they're going to have any mileage or support left in the bank to be able to resist. And I don't think that they're going to try and prevent this by force. And I think, were they to be stupid enough to try and prevent this by force, there's only two possible outcomes. One outcome is they would just make it a certainty by they may delay the process temporarily, but I think they'd lose all moral authority. Not that they have much now, but even more likely, you have to remember that the armed forces and the police and so on in the Western Cape are made up of the people of the Western Cape, and I think it's highly unlikely that in a situation where the people of the Western Cape have given a clear mandate that they want to be independent, that the people are going to turn on themselves. So and frankly, my view is I think the ANC is pretty stupid, but I don't think they're that stupid, and I accept that's not the accepted normal view, and many people see a more darker scenario than that, and I hope I'm right, but I'm open to other possibilities too, and I recognise that I have a minority opinion, and that certainly doesn't mean I'm right.
Right. What about you, Des? What do you have to say about this?
Scott, I want to coin something that Dr. Hammond normally mentioned, and that's a thing called the velvet divorce. Now, what you have to do is you have to establish and build the reality on the ground in terms of your mandates and your support base to such a point where it can't be ignored, be it from the local government point of view, be it from national government, be it from international organizations. And the moment you've built that to a point of support where it becomes a fact, you can't reason it away, you can't ignore it, then you have to get in a situation where they have no option but to come to the table and listen to what you have to say. And I agree with Phil. I mean, it will be amazingly naive and ridiculous and stupid from the ANC to declare war on their own people, because until we secede, we're still part of South Africa. So you can't turn around and declare war on part of your own country or part of your own people.
Right.
But you've got to get to the point where the will of the people becomes such a fact. And if you look at our document on the very first pages, we say independence will only work when it's supported and it's subject to the will of the people. So get to that point where we have that 50% plus one, and obviously once we've got to the point of 1.6 million people, the growth is not going to stop. Then you're going to have a lot of people that says, hang on, this is becoming a reality, we now want to support it. So if you can imagine if you go forth with the support of, say, 2 million people, you really become a factor. I always say that if I walk into your office tomorrow morning and I say to you, Scott, we would like to secede the Western Cape, and you will look at me and say, okay, now who supports you? Or alternatively, I walk into your office with an audited database of 1.6 million people and say, Scott, we want to secede. Here is the people. Here's the will of the people. We're going to have two different conversations.
Right. Okay, now I'm going to put that question to Dr. Hammond. Peter?
Yes, I believe that the time is long past that countries fight civil wars over self-determination and referendums. Just take, for example, that Canada a few years ago gave the French-speaking Quebec citizens a referendum on if they wanted independence. And if they had chosen it, Canada would not have resisted. They gave them the question. Great Britain just had a secession vote with Scotland. And Scotland, if Scotland had chosen to go free, I think there would have been a lot of people unhappy, but they wouldn't have fought Scotland over it. Those days are past. Just like the Soviet Union, when it broke up, they accepted Ukraine had the right to be independent, and while they were a bit unhappy about Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia, and Belarus, and so on, but they did break free in Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan, Turkmenistan. There's so many countries that have broken free without any need for war. As the velvet divorce with Czech and Slovakia being a good example.
Right.
And we've passed the time when you would have, like in Yugoslavia, where the Serbs would fight to keep an artificial union of different language groups and religions together. So I believe as long as Des says, we follow the legal realm of plainly it's self-determination, this is the way to go. And also, as has been alluded to, the SANDF is not in a good shape. And in fact, I think the Defence Force of Botswana has got more capability right now than the SANDF. It's been basically used as jobs for the comrades. And I don't think as a military force it's that significant. Plus, the Western Cape is easily defendable. We are surrounded by massive deserts and wilderness in the Karoo. We've got massive mountain ranges. And then we've got very rugged coastlines. It's a very defendable area, and you've got to come across some pretty hostile terrain to get here as well. the Western Cape's geographically separate. We also in a very different climate. In fact, we've got a Mediterranean climate where we are the only part of this country, virtually the continent, that gets winter rains and dry, hot summers. So the Western Cape is different in just about every way. We have a lot of people here living in the Western Cape also, who have overseas citizenships and live overseas as well. And there's some very important people who have holiday homes or part of the year they live here from all over the world. There's many people with investments in the Western Cape. None of them would want that upset. Yeah. And then you think of the film industry that use the Western Cape. So we've got a lot of cards to play on our side. I believe if we do things in a legal, plainly self-determination way. Bear in mind that the United Nations Bill of Rights accepts self-determination. The African Union Constitution accepts self-determination. Even the South African Constitution recognizes the right to self-determination. So if we're working on a self-determination legal referendum way, and we have the majority of voters in the Western Cape supporting it, I believe that it will be a fait accompli. And having said that, it's quite possible many in the ANC would be relieved to see the hotbed of most opposition to them taken away, because that'll give them greater percentage control where they are, because the Western Cape's their biggest opposition in many ways. So I wouldn't be surprised if some ANC would say good riddance.
Right. Oh, well, that's an interesting perspective. Dr. Munns, Peter, you want to add to this?
Yeah, I think also what Dr. Hammond said as well. You know, what we found in KwaZulu-Natal, if you have a look at the potential for the growth in terms of mining, if they hadn't sold everything off to China and all the other BRIC partners, the mineral resources, South Africa is a geological freak of nature. Noble metals, rare earths, precious, stones, and just an incredible amount of minerals and wealth, and just unequaled in the world except for Russia, and that has become the envy of the BRIC partners. And unfortunately, even at the moment, we've got Ingonyama Trust Land, which hasn't been developed as it should have been in terms of commercial development, industrial. KwaZulu-Natal could quite easily be the breadbasket. We're not talking, if we look at the Free State, there's certain areas that are perfect for maize and certain crops. But if you have a look at the history of South Africa, and forget about even the sugar cane, but if you have a look at the crops, and so there's no reason for the lack of food security and poverty relief. And I think that is really what the priority should be at the moment. We're critical thinkers and strategic planners actually have a look at the needs and then say, right, what can that province do? And that's what we're trying to do, is to get those let's call them silos, because I mean it's really, and as Dr. Peter Hammond mentioned as well, I think that the church has been in a coma of denial and ignorance. You've got 75,865 churches. You've got 80% of the population claiming to be Christian. 66% of all Black African people claim to embrace the Christian faith. But at the end of the day, you've got starving in this land of plenty. So this is terrible. And you mentioned as well the United Nations. The churches have become a world war of worldviews, and religious clubs and social clubs, religious institutions. And at the end of the day, they're not doing enough collectively to put up an opposition. I mean, it's in the Bible. It's a biblical command to challenge and oppose the government. Daniel 5:27. But the church is not doing that because there's no united front. There's no organization. There's no leadership. Nobody's stepping up and taking the authority to do something. So, to finish off, I would say that it takes better organization, to have leadership, take the authority, and then start working for the benefit of the entire country, and let the leaders come together and do something collectively for the common good.
Right. Now, I'm going to be now giving the questions that we received during this live stream from the side chat. And if any of you would like to just put your hand up, and I'll give the floor to you, unless they actually aim at a particular person. And I'm going to use it in the chronological order. In other words, the first question that came from the start of the live stream, we'll start at that and work our way through. Red Sky says, at 1992 referendum, I need to clarify on this, wasn't that a consensus on anti-apartheid? Does anyone want to respond to that question? Peter, over to you.
Yes, well, not really, because we already had a referendum in 1993 about apartheid. 1983, P.W. Botha put to us a referendum to abolish apartheid and replace it with a whole reform legislation, bringing coloureds and Indians into parliament, and there was a whole range of things. So apartheid was actually abolished in the referendum of 1983. 1992 was F.W. de Klerk's National Party asking for effectively what turned out to be a blank check to do whatever they wanted to do with the ANC. And many of us who opposed this referendum in 92 were saying, what are we voting on? There's no specifics, there's no constitution. So the 1992 referendum was not about apartheid. In fact, those people who think that apartheid was abolished by Mandela are deceived, because there was no apartheid legislation left for Mandela to abolish, because P.W. Botha had abolished apartheid, and the last two little props holding up apartheid was the Race Classification Act, which wasn't being enforced, and the separate voters' rolls, which F.W. de Klerk got rid of. So no, 92 was nothing to do with apartheid. It was everything to do with the National Party asking for a blank check in their negotiations with the ANC.
Right. Okay, our next question. Varietas has said, were the contemporary provinces deliberately structured according to majority population groups within, such as the Xhosa in the Eastern Cape, the Tswana in the Northwest, the Basotho in Free State, and basically it's almost like, this is what I'm adding, it's almost like Verwoerd's homeland policy. And anyone like to respond to that question? Yep, carry on, Peter.
Right, so there's no doubt that the Zulus lived in the Kingdom of Zululand and the Xhosa lived in Transkei, and the Cape was where the Khoisan and the so-called coloured people and the whites lived, and Transvaal was the Transvaal Republic of the Boers and the Orange Free State of Voortrekker Place. So you had these different, of course, Swaziland, Lesotho or Basotholand and Bechuanaland were there. So the estates were the way they were. It wasn't that somebody sat in some room and decided, well, let's put all the Xhosa in Transkei. That's where they were. That's a natural land and homeland, and the Zulus lived in the Kingdom of Zululand. Now, of course, as the mines developed and as tremendous opportunities rose up in the urban centers such as Kimberley and Johannesburg, you had migrant workers pouring in from neighboring countries, like from Bechuanaland, Botswana, Swaziland, Zululand, and so on, pouring into these areas. And that created some of the demographic confusion, which led to some of the later policies. But it's not that somebody actually planned, okay, let's put the Boers in Transvaal. No, actually they migrated there, and the Zulus were in Zululand. So the demographic reality of South Africa is the way it was, and I think they just tried to draw the boundaries around where the people lived, not actually relocating them. There's very little forced relocations in these areas. Most of it was just recognizing this is where these groups live and let each group rule themselves. I think that was the theory, at least.
Right. Anyone else like to talk on this question? Just put your hand up and we'll give you the floor. Dr. Munns?
Yeah, I think Peter's pretty much covered it correctly. I think that there was a lot of land dispossession in certain areas, but 100% correct. I mean, if you have a look at prior to 1994, between 1948 and 94, you had an industrial revolution. You had an agrarian, agricultural revolution. The country was prosperous. And if you also have a look at certain areas, up in Venda and other areas, people were losing their cattle. You had foot and mouth. You had various anthrax and other diseases. because there wasn't people living in those rural areas. They were also poverty stricken, so they were tempted, to start moving towards the urban areas and looking for employment, gainful employment. So yeah, I think just the growth that we had was a great attraction. And then the government of the day then structured the homelands and established those boundaries. But at the moment, I mean, there's 13 of them, 13 official languages, 13 cultures. And these are the factors that need to be taken into consideration going forward.
Right. Now, Phil or Des, do you want to make a comment on that question? No? Okay. Let me move to the next one. Tertia Marit says, what is the difference between secession and independence? Now, I might put that question to Des.
Scott, secession and independence is more or less the same thing. I think what you must distinguish between is self-determination and independence. Self-determination, Dr. Munns earlier on referred to Urania. A model like Urania or Kleinfontein would be a model of self-determination where you are still sitting within the greater entity. Well, you're still sitting you're first of all sitting within your greater municipality and then within the entity of South Africa. So although you can determine your own language policies, your own schools, etc., you're still part of this sinking ship called South Africa. Now, self-determination is not something that we advocate. We talk about secession, sovereign independence, and that is the two terms I think one must distinguish between.
Right. Phil, do you want to add anything? No. Okay. Okay, next question. I think this is probably one I'll direct at Dr. Munns. Veriatis has asked, how can traditional African royal houses be mobilized to a common objective pursuing greater sovereignty for their communities, thereby achieving the Federation of Independence?
If we have a look at what has happened, if we have a look at the 8 Zulu monarchs, right, go back to Shaka, and then you also had the Mtetwa tribes, and if you understand your Zulu history, the appointment of the king of the Zulus, Relatini, is the 8th monarch, and his uncle is King Goodwill Buthelezi, and Prince Buthelezi. But if you have a look at the history of the way that the Zulus have actually evolved from those various tribes, in 1879 you had 13 chieftains. This was in 1878, the British said, after Battle of Usain Lawana, Ulundi and Rorke's Drift, the Zulus have to stop killing the British. You can kill the Boers, but don't kill the British anymore. And they gave them an ultimatum tree on the 11th of December, 1878. And Robert Dunn was very involved in that ultimatum. That is when, in 1879, they established the Wolseley Settlement that incorporated 13 chiefdoms under King Kitswaya. So there was a lot of tribalism, because there is always factionalism at the end of the day. You've got so many different tribes, even the royal house of monarchs, you've got 300 traditional leaders. And that is quite something to separate or to organize. So in order for the people to gain their independence, and I think that's what the question is relating to, number one is that the Ingonyama Trust land was given by the previous government and obviously in cooperation with the ANC. That was a decision that was taken in 1993 to appease. There were a lot of people that were appeased at that time, including Ramaphosa, including the Oppenheimers and also the mining giants. They were looked after. But in order to provide stability and peace in the area, King Zwelithini was given that land as a custodian of that land. So I don't think that the independence is going to come as much as what we need, in the sense that you need to define it, the independence, the actual word independence. And that's why we've been promoting rather the peaceful and the freedom from despotic rule and this totalitarian control. But there's a lot of different views, Scott. There's a lot of different opinions. And there's a lot of factionalism which has taken place, within the KwaZulu-Natal province.
Right. Dr. Hammond, would you like to add to that? Oh, sound.
Oh, yeah.
Peter? Sound.
Yes.
There you go.
We praise the Lord for Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi and our friends in the Kingdom of Zululand. They certainly have got a strong claim for independence and for secession. And I know that there's a lot of allegiance and there's discussions behind the scenes. In fact, last year, Peter Munns and I had this Christian Action Coalition Revival Conference in KwaZulu-Natal, where Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi actually came and opened the conference. And in discussion with them, there's no doubt that we're thinking on the same wavelength on many different areas. And in fact, I'm convinced that people are just waiting for one group to stand up, one province to secede. I think there will be many others, and it'll be a healthy thing. Just like when the Soviet Union broke up into 15 different republics, there was a rejoicing throughout the whole of what used to be the Soviet Union. It wasn't a bad thing. And when Yugoslavia broke into 6 republics, that's a good thing. And it was good for freedom, and the people on the ground were freed from shackles. So what we are seeing, if the indigenous leaders of Africa, if the traditional chiefs and kings will make their stand, I believe it will be greatly welcomed by the people on the ground.
Great. Now, Phil or Des, do you want to add to that, or should we move on to the next question?
Put my hand up.
Oh, yeah, go, Peter.
I'd just like to add value to what Dr. Hammond said. That was at the William Carey, the annual event, and they, Prince Buthelezi arrived there, cavalcade, and it was actually fantastic because it was a culmination. This is very, very important. If I can just take a minute on this, please, Scott.
Go ahead.
In 2008, there was xenophobia. It was wicked. Then in 2012, you had the Marikana massacres. And then, of course, in 2015, then we had the situation where you had xenophobia again. Then you had that conflict where you had people like Edward Zuma creating drama and accusing King Zwelithini of mobilizing the call to arms, the Nguni, the Indabeli, and the Xhosa, and the Zulu, and the Swazi people to create the xenophobic attacks and violence and intolerance to others. I went to the palace in 2015, and I questioned King Zwelithini, and I said to him, are you a peacemaker or are you a warlord? And I sat with him, and we discussed this. And he convinced me that he was a man of peace. And we have a very, very good relationship. We also have a very good relationship with the Dunn family. And people are now starting to see the need for peace. I personally developed what was called a peace accord, and I presented that to King, and I gave him a Prince Buthelezi. I gave him a copy of that because it addresses the question of law and order. It revisits collaborative justice, revisiting this whole justice system, National Prosecuting Authority, special investigation units, where nothing is done. If we have a look at the Zondo Commission, 800 million later, no one's prosecuted. They're immune from prosecution. So you have to go back to the law and order. You've got to get rid of these people who are stealing. They have an insatiable need for greed, and they are stealing. They're plundering, and it's treason. It's a crime against humanity. And as soon as people come to that understanding, but getting back to King Zwelithini, he's a man of peace, and he wants peace, and he wants agricultural development, he wants renewable energy, but he needs people who have got the skills, who can do it. But unfortunately, if the government has a policy expropriation of land without compensation, you're chasing away investors. but we at least understand the social, economic, political, and also the health and justice challenges. And that's what we needed to do now. But we're looking for leadership to step up to the plate and to start putting in the infrastructure for service delivery. So yeah, we're working fantastically together, you know, with people, like-minded people that are looking for the same things.
Right. Okay, the next question is from Benjamin Kutzer. And Benjamin says, when Cape independence happens, how will border security work and immigration take place? And I'll put that question first to Des, and then perhaps Phil can respond after that.
Scott, you will become a sovereign, independent country. So, like at the moment, if you go to Namibia or any country in the world, there's an immigration process, or there's a passport process, or visa applications. We will be nothing different from that. In terms of your border control, as with any other country, crossing a border, there will be border posts, there will be border control. Border control, a lot of people ask us, I think perhaps tongue-in-cheek, if we're going to build a wall. No, we've progressed in this life far beyond building walls or putting up fences. You've got artificial intelligence to do border patrol, and which will basically augment your feet on the ground. So, but the bottom line is, yes, you will be a new sovereign country. If you want to come in from Johannesburg, you'll have to have a passport. If you want to come and work here, there will be an application process for work visas. Nothing different from what we find if we travel abroad. Scott, you there? I think we've lost Scott.
Maybe Phil, you should continue because you were asked to follow up.
I'm not sure if we've lost Scott. I guess we've probably lost the audience, have we?
We might.
Yeah.
But
right,
if we're on and connected, then you've got to assume this might be live. So, Phil, maybe you should
Fair enough.
take the opportunity.
So, look, I think we're probably so my feeling would be that we're probably going to end up exactly where Des said we would, and I think the other thing we just always have to be careful, and people always ask what's it going to be like after. We also just have to be cognizant of the fact that we're individual groups and we're pushing for independence, but as individual groups we don't actually have a mandate to make these decisions. So all we're doing is making our predictions or our suggestions. Ultimately, once we've got secession, then I guess we'll have a government of national unity, which will go on to general elections, and so there's going to have to be a political process where we negotiate all of these things, and we can all make our suggestions, but obviously ultimately that they're decisions that will be beyond any of us as individual persons or groups. But we can look, exactly as Des said, we can look to norms, to international norms, and given that the G20 countries all have exactly those policies on immigration, and South Africa itself has that policy on immigration, it'll be the same. And I think actually the one that Peter, you mentioned earlier, I always think Namibia is the great example. What's it going to be like in an independent Cape? Exactly like it is with an independent Namibia. It's exactly the same scenario. A lot of people have got friends on both sides of the border. We come and go quite peacefully. We carry on to interact, but there is a border to be crossed.
We have a user called Jan van Riebeck, and he's written, "I will help with the border control, like the old days, shoot anything that moves." Now, Dr. Hammond or Dr. Munns, would you like to add anything to the discussion on this? Peter?
Yeah.
Okay,
Sorry,
let's go with Dr. Hammond first and then Dr. Munns.
Yes, obviously the Western Cape will become attractive for people who want jobs. But on the other hand, the Cape, the way it is envisaged to be a free enterprise model, not a socialist model of freebies and so on, it will also become a place where criminals would want to emigrate from, because we are going to have a decentralized police force. The municipalities are going to get control again, and they're going to find a lot of no-go areas for crime. So I think we'll see people who want freebies and people who want easy crime where you can get away with it will move out, and people who want jobs and opportunities for hard work will move in. And I believe a lot of people have left South Africa for many reasons, including fear about the crime or the fact they couldn't get jobs because they were too male and too pale, or BBBEE and corruption, so on, will move back. So I think you're going to see quite a lot of realignment and moving around in independent Cape. And obviously, there will need to be border controls. And also, once independent, we'll have the opportunity that if foreigners commit crimes in the country, they can be expelled. And that's what led to Brexit. I remember being in Britain at the time when the Queen made a speech saying that my government will expel foreigners who commit crimes on our shores and ban them from re-entry. And Brussels said, you can't do that. That's against EU regulations. And that was where the whole movement for Brexit would be. You're telling us we cannot expel foreign criminals from our own soil?
A bunch of unelected bureaucrats.
Is our sovereign no longer sovereign? Is this now some province of the EU? And so the whole movement for Brexit grew out of this fact that we couldn't even kick out criminals from our own soil. So CapeXit is following the same idea as Brexit in the sense that, well, we are tired of foreigners messing around our own province, and it's about time for us to reclaim our independence as the Cape of Good Hope.
Yeah.
Okay, now I got a message that for some reason people have lost me. Well, I'm here. If you can hear me, please type 1 in the side chat. If you can't hear me, please type 2 in the side chat. But I hope you can hear our guests. That's the most important thing. Okay, let's continue with the questions. CJ Christian says, what about the legal process? Other secession groups have concrete plans for border protection, interim constitution and government. Need something beyond just an idea, with all respect. Okay, let's go back to Des. You got something to say about... Oh, I'm sorry. I was going to have Dr. Munns respond to that question before. Peter, would you like to just respond? Then we'll get on to this next question.
Just to finish off that as well, last Thursday I was actually at the palace of the king, and that was to celebrate his 49th year. In July of 1971, he was appointed as the 8th monarch. And they have been training the Royal Guard. Now, these are SAPS, people highly trained. I was very impressed with the whole procedure, the drills and everything else. And you could not believe the support. Our friend Vicky Clearly was there, sitting next to the king.
Okay.
And he made a statement, but the support from the SAPS for rural development and rural protection now by the SAPS, that was the event, and that was at the stadium in Nongoma. Now, this is going to make a tremendous amount of difference in terms of bringing together law and order, and also there's a lot of influence. We're bringing in the right people to assist with that policing and providing that protection and defense. So there's definitely steps in the right direction to bring in that law and order, and also to bring in that justice system. I was also with Judge Ngwenya, Judge Jerome Ngwenya. So there is definitely a move towards putting an end to all this corruption and all this malfeasance.
Right.
So, yeah.
Okay. Now, let's get back to the next question. I'm sorry about that, Peter. I forgot that you were next in line. Okay, CJ Christian asks, what about the legal process? Other secession groups have concrete plans for border protection, interim constitution, and government. We need something beyond just an idea, with all respect. I'm going to put that to Peter Hammond. Peter?
Well, I think Des can answer that very well too from the CapeXit side. But, you know, this idea that we go through a whole lot of legal steps and it's all directed to outside, and some another, the United Nations is going to tell ANC, you've got to hand over the Western Cape, that's a pipe dream. And it's also a pipe dream for any particular group to be saying this and this and this is exactly what's going to happen, because as Phil's just said, we are advocacy groups and we may be think tanks and we may be mobilizers, but at the end of the day, the Cape voters are going to have to elect their representatives who will have to enact, and we hope that they will take many of the ideas of our think tanks and the advice here, but it is not for us to decide, and it's not for them to decide. It is for the Cape people to decide what future they want and how that will take. Now, I would trust they're not going to try and follow in the footsteps of failure. Centralized, bureaucratic, socialist, top-down, no, that's failed. Let's not follow in the footsteps of failure. Let's follow in the footsteps of success. Let's follow examples of excellence like Singapore from an economics point of view, or Switzerland from a decentralized free situation. So right here, I believe that what these people are saying is what we need to be doing is giving prescriptions, but we can't do prescriptions. Oh, and this idea that some unelected individuals are able to place upon a country or a future country exactly what it should be, that's premature. We can have think tanks, we can have suggestions and models, and we can learn from history and from what's going on around us, and economists advising. But I don't believe any single group has the mandate or the authority to be dictating what the future is going to be like or how to reach it without people on the ground, feet on the ground, without the Cape residents mobilizing for this and the voters voting for this. It's not going to happen. Now, the idea that you can just follow a whole lot of legal steps and some another, you're going to get justice from the hands of the corrupt criminals who are looting us all the time, or the UN who doesn't care, I don't believe that's realistic. But I think Des Palm can answer this question a bit more specifically, because that's what CapeXit deals with a lot.
Right. Now, before I put over to Des Palm, I guess the message you would give to Hein Marks from the ULA is that he's always welcome to sit around the table with the Cape Independence Forum and, participate positively and be part of the group.
Well, of course, yes. Anyone interested in self-determination, independence, secession, freedom for the people of the Cape are welcome. And the only rules we've got is that we've got to be positive, practical, future focused and solution focused, and be restrained from saying negative or posting negative films, videos, posts, memes against other groups working for it. I mean, we've got to be polite. We've got to work together in a constructive way. So the only real rules in the Cape Independence Forum is that we be committed to positive, practical, future-orientated, and not engage in any kind of backstabbing or undermining of other independence groups.
I get it. Okay, Des Palm, over to you.
Scott, I want to reiterate what Dr. Hammond said. You cannot say that you propose a direct democracy, which in essence means the people will govern, and then you go and you prescribe a lot of new rules and regulations, etc. We often get the question, what would the flag look like and what would the country be called? We can't decide that. We can advise to certain things. We may even advise or propose certain policies. At the end of the day, you will, and we propose 6 district governments, which will be the 6 main areas in the Western Cape. And at the end of the day, you may find that people in the Karoo want something different than the people in on the Garden Route or up the west coast of the Western Cape. So that would be determined by the people. That is what a direct democracy is about. By the same token, you cannot propose yourself or want to cast yourself in any political role after independence, because then again you're going against the spirit of the direct democracy that you propose. Now, as to legal processes and things being in place, CapeXit values the will and the mandate of the people probably at about 95% of the process. If you do not have the mandate and the support of the people, you can do handstands and cartwheels, it's going to mean nothing. You can send as many letters you want to, you can raise as many flags you want to, it's going to mean absolutely zilch. Like I said earlier on, the 2 different conversations we'll have when I walk into your office, one without the mandate of the people, one with the mandate of the people. So you cannot simply attach a single digit value to the support and the mandate of the people. That is the most important process in this entire thing. So as to having legal processes done and completed and constitutions written and so on, yes, there is a time and a place for that, but what has to happen now is to mobilize the people and really build and establish this reality on the ground.
Right. Now, Phil, is there something you'd like to add?
Only to add to it, I think, in essence, of course, what Peter and Des have said is correct, and I think I actually would like to just reiterate Des's point there at the end. I think, we all feel that I understand why people get fascinated on how the border is going to work and where we are, what is the legal process and what is that, and I think people kind of obsess over the detail of that, and they miss the elephant in the room. And actually, what is important about Cape independence, the biggest task by far greater than all of the other issues, is getting to 50% plus one. That is the thing. And whether it's CapeXit's mandate or it's a referendum or however we get there, it doesn't matter. Fundamentally, the biggest task is getting independence sold to 50%, and once we've got a mandate, because without a mandate everything else is utterly irrelevant, and so obtaining the mandate, and once we have the mandate, everything else then makes sense. You're in the game. Until you have a mandate, you've got no game, and therefore I would reiterate that for any of the thing. And I think there's as a movement, and that's one of that coming back to our march, coming back to the things that we're doing. That's what's so powerful, is actually getting this message out there, because ultimately the biggest challenge, and people totally underestimate. My background is in marketing, and people totally underestimate what has to be achieved to deliver 50% plus one. You see people saying, look, we'd walk a referendum. We won't walk a referendum. At this point in time, if we called a referendum today, we'd lose a referendum, and which is why none of us, we all couch in terms, we would like a referendum when this, when that, because we understand that if we called one today, we'd probably lose it. Almost certainly we'd lose it. We polled recently, we were at 36% in terms of support. And that's brilliant for where we are. And I think that's the thing that people just need to understand. That's the worker. And given the demographics of the Western Cape, we're not going to get a 75% or an 80% vote in favour of Cape independence. We probably are going to limp to 51 or 52%. But thankfully, we only have to limp to 51 or 52%. But that is the biggest task at hand. And everything else is kind of a distraction from that main task. So and I think that's important for everybody that's supporting independence, is just to understand that is the biggest thing that has to be done, to sell this message to people so that we actually can get a referendum and win it. Or if we go a different route and we've got it in mandates, it's the same thing. Ultimately it's the democratic will of the people, because without some expression of a democratic will of the people, independence is dead in the water. Right.
Now I've got a question directed at you, Phil.
Sorry,
carry on, Peter.
Add to that, what Phil has said is very important, but bear in mind, the main reason why we're not ready for a referendum yet is because the vast majority of the population in the Western Cape have not even heard of the Cape independence movement yet. We're still on the education phase, and There's a lot of people whose only source of information is maybe SATV, shame poor people, and they get more disinformation and distraction than news and education information. But we're convinced that anybody who looks at the facts and understands the economics and what is going on and the options and the implications will support independence. But factually, because of lack of finances, because of lack of major sponsors, and because we are not given fair access to the state media and to the big mainstream media, at this stage, we're not ready for referendum yet, but considering we're just using social media, word of mouth, and some local actions, it's extraordinary, the support. And to think that CapeXit's grown from 10,000 members 18 months ago to 600,000 signed up members for independence in just 18 months just shows the exponential growth. But that doesn't mean we're there yet. We've still got a long way to go of more education. Now, if people were to finance for more billboards and more leaflets and more airtime, and we'd get more opportunities on community radio stations and we might be able to get some more advertising slots and do more marketing, well, then of course your chance of winning a referendum becomes exponentially better. But right now, we are operating on such limitations. It's staggering how much support we've gotten in spite of it. But realistically, most people haven't even considered the aspects of independence in any sense and have never really heard the case for independence. So that's why Phil's saying right now we wouldn't win the referendum, but we're convinced we will when the majority of people in the Western Cape understand the issues and implications.
Right. Now, I just want to say to Des, I'd like your comment on this. I think one of the most important drivers for your incredible growth has been the Cape Independence Forum, because you're working together, and Eendracht maakt macht. Do you want to respond to that?
Ja, Scott, that was a nice way of saying it. Eendracht maakt macht. Jou Afrikaans raak al hoe beter. Yeah, don't say that to an Afrikaans speaking. I'll grab it to carry on in Afrikaans. Scott, no, look, a couple of things has been happening lately. I mean, first of all, this whole lockdown thing was good, because people were then confronted with the inability of this government to handle a crisis situation. They had more time to spend becoming more aware of what is really going on in South Africa, how their rights are being curtailed and taken away every day. So from that perspective, lockdown was good. That was part of the growth we experienced. But make no mistake, I mean, when you get to things like expropriation, which is now most likely being written into the Constitution, and when the holy grail of pension funds are now clearly and squarely in the sights of the government, people then start taking stock of where they're going to, the things that they always thought was safe. I remember as a youngster when I grew up, my dad used to say to me, you must try and get a job where you get like a government job where they have a very good solid pension. I can't tell my grandchildren that because it's no longer true. So people are now realizing more and more every day that where is the solution? I always say we've got to look at the realities and we've got to look at the solutions or the options. Now, the realities are exactly that. We've got 114 discriminatory black economic empowerment laws. Pension funds are now being targeted. Expropriation, not only of land, expropriation of any asset is a reality. It's no longer becoming a reality, it's a reality. So once you're faced with these realities, the only option that we have found, and CapeXit said from the onset, if anybody can come with a better plan to the table, we'll listen to your plan. And like Phil said earlier on, if we can reach that goal of independence and your plan is better than ours, then let's get there. We haven't had any viable and sustainable alternative to secession or independence. So I think it's also a case of people waking up. And then I think the combined effort, Dr. Peter Hammond has been at the coalface of secessions for a long time, and the combined effort again, which basically was portrayed in the Clutersville March. Combined effort of organizations having a common goal and getting to it. People are sitting up, realizing that, hang on, something is happening here. And at the end of the day, you either support it or you don't support it. And I think Dr. Hammond is absolutely right. It's about getting the awareness out there, getting people to realize that it's their right to do so or to support this. And we're quite excited because we know that this thing is going to run and the algorithm is going to kick in some other stage. And when we get to the 900 or 1 million mark, I think some interesting things are going to happen. And I think we're going to get the tsunami effect in support.
Right. Well, I just have to say, you mentioned Dr. Hammond there and his work in helping people within a nation secede in the past, and I'm talking in particular southern Sudan and places like that. You know, you couldn't get a better guy on you in your court. I mean, he's a fabulously experienced guy.
Absolutely.
Now, I've got a question for Phil Craig, and it's directed at you, and it's from a fellow called Monkey Pushing Wood, believe it or not. We have some very strange users. And he writes, and I know nothing about this, but he says, has Phil Craig reached out to Canzuk, C-A-N-Z-U-K? I think that's Canada, Zuid Africa, UK, maybe, Canzuk. for maybe membership? I hear the lead guy was born in South Africa. Does anyone know about CapeXit?
Never heard of them, to be honest.
Okay,
so
no one's ever heard of it,
yeah.
so we don't know anything about that. Okay, Leon Peterson says, if we become independent, what's going to happen with the illegal foreigners living in the Western Cape? Now, I guess I'll put that, seeing that we got you on, Des, do you want to respond to that first?
Scott, you've got to again look at this holistically. The moment you become independent, yes, your illegal immigrants will have to basically get out. But you can't just willy-nilly kick people out. You have to look at, obviously you're going to be having a much better economy. You're going to have the investments coming in. So this thing has got to be pulled through to the level of being able to provide things like training facilities and equipping people to become trained, become knowledgeable, become skilled, to contribute positively to the economy. That is the ideal place you want to be. You have an economy where people are contributing to positively. But yes, illegal immigrants, I mean, that is what the people in the Western Cape, one of the reasons that they're very upset about is that they cannot find work in their own province. They cannot find housing. At the moment, we have, if you look at places like Mitchell's Plain, we have grandmothers who are backyard dwellers, and she's been sitting there for a generation or two. So there is a lot of unhappiness about various social factors. But yes, you have to address the thing, but you will again address this within the context of immigration law, and that immigration law will be decided on by the people.
Now I just got clarification on CapeXit. CapeXit is Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and the UK, the unification of the Anglosphere. So that's what CapeXit is. So I learned something tonight. Okay. Now, Phil, would you like to add to the comments by Des?
No, look, again, we're broadly on the same page. I think it comes back. So everything that I measure against is my answer. You know, is anything I say in public more likely or less likely to help us get 50% plus one in a referendum? And I think I think one of the things that we're all very conscious of is there are a lot of sensitivities around some of these issues, and you have to handle them very things. So we understand, of course, that there are issues in terms of illegals, and clearly we're going to have to restore some form of discipline, which has gone out of the window under South Africa. But it has to be done in a way that is seen as fair and is just and is reasonable. And obviously, one of the things that we're all super cautious of is we're very wary to start talking about sending people back anywhere because there's connotations there, and it's very easy for that to be misunderstood or deliberately misinterpreted. So yes, it's an issue that's got to be dealt with. But I agree with Des that fundamentally it's one, and equally we have to understand that this whole situation on independence is about improving the lives of the people of the Western Cape. That's the biggest thing, and actually that has to come with compassion and with humanity, and we have to treat people as we wish to be treated ourselves, and that means being very careful how we tread. But ultimately, we are going to have to restore law and order. If that clarifies the point or muddies it, I don't know, but that's my feelings on the subject.
Right. Now, would either of the Peters like to add to the discussion on this?
No, I think it's been dealt with well enough.
Okay. Let's move on to the next question. CJ Christian asks, are any of your guests willing to help people move to the Western Cape now?
Well, the question is resources and capabilities. None of us are well-funded individuals. We are doing what we can with what we've got, and what we really need is people who are willing to help with the cause, and who are going to help with the marketing and getting the word out. And if people can travel and help, that would be great. But realistically, we're not Anglo-American with inexhaustible funds available, to put it mildly.
Right. Okay. Anyone want to add any more to that? No? Oh, yeah. Carry on, Des.
Scott, yeah, I think for people, and we also get that question virtually every day, to move to the Western Cape or not would be up to each individual person to decide. It would be like you would want to move to any other place from where you are. We're not telling people move now. If you can't move now, you want to move after independence, obviously, there will be the process of immigrating from South Africa, immigrating to the Western Cape, which would not going to be a difficult process. So we don't think people must pack up and sell everything and place themselves in financial detriment to feel that they have to move to the Western Cape now. Not necessary at all. So it would be up to each individual to decide, I would like to move to the Western Cape or not. What we do find is that places like the Garden Route is finding a lot of people moving from Gauteng down to the Garden Route, but that would be part of a normal process to them.
Right.
If I could just add
Carry
to
on,
that, if I can add to that, as soon as the Cape gets independence, there is no doubt that property prices are going to rise.
Yeah.
So I believe in the future, realistically, if a person is interested, they will find it more cost effective to move now if they're committed. And that's just on the economic side. There's no doubt, and this is an R.W. Johnson observation as this British economist who advocates Cape independence. He actually, after writing a book, How Long Can South Africa Survive, he moved himself and his whole family to the Cape. I think he's living somewhere in Tableview. So that's a vote of confidence in the Cape's future. I would say to people who are interested, if they are committed, we can do with their help. And if they moved now, they'd probably find it a whole lot less expensive than when the Cape's independent. When the Cape's independent, I am convinced property prices are going to really skyrocket.
Well, I reckon tourism is going to go right through the roof. It's going to be a huge, huge industry. Now, I have one final question from the side chat. And then I've got a couple of questions just to close off the live stream. Alan Morris has asked, if the Western Cape becomes independent, will all the people who've been shipped in since 1994 as voting fodder for the ANC to try and get control of the Cape be deported? Who would like to answer that question?
I think Phil already did answer it.
Oh, that was illegals, wasn't it?
Look, let's be absolutely clear. Anybody who's in the Western Cape is a legal citizen, and they have as much right to remain as everybody else. And when we talk about the referendum, we're talking about 50% plus one of registered voters, and so no, nobody is going to be sent home. And actually, if you want to finish independence off dead in the water, talk about sending people home, and you can't do anything better to defeat Cape independence than start going down that route. So it's an absolute no-no. Cape independence is for all of the people in the Western Cape, and that's non-negotiable with all of us as groups. We're non-racial, and non-racial means non-racial.
Right. Anyone want to add to that? Yeah, Des?
Yeah, Scott, I totally agree with Phil. We've said very clearly that we want independence of the Western Cape for all who lives within. You cannot willy-nilly start kicking people out if they've been here from 1994. We do realize that there's a lot of political displacements taking place at the moment for gaining votes in the Western Cape, but you have to address that again through the means of immigration policy.
Right. Peter?
But I'd also say is bear in mind that the way we envisage the Western Cape, the Cape of Good Hope, as I prefer to call it, is to be a tax haven that will attract investors and job creators and create maximum employment. And I believe the Western Cape, or the Cape of Good Hope, will be a very attractive destination for people who want to work hard. But the policies are going to change. It's no longer going to be a welfare state with lots of freebies and incentives for people to do absolutely nothing. And so I think you're going to see a great realignment. You're going to see people who want to work hard and get employed to come here, and people who are expecting free grants from the state finding it's better to trek out. And those who want law and order and safe communities will want to move in, and people who are committed to a life of crime, finding this is no longer a friendly environment for a criminal and trekking out. So I do believe there will be a realignment, which you have seen in countries such as when South Sudan seceded from Northern Sudan. You could see there was a moving backwards and forwards, and this happened same with Ukraine and Russia. So there will be some natural movement. There doesn't need to be any forced removals. All you need is freedom. And in freedom, people will align with, do you want to work? Do you want full employment? Or do you want freebies? Do you want to live law and order or crime? And so I think there will be a natural migration that will come about from the policies, which we think will be super productive policies that will encourage the entrepreneur and reward the worker and the hardworking person and attract the employers and job creators and the investors. So I don't think people need to worry about those who've been tricked in for demographic vote fixing, because, you know, they all go home for Christmas. They all go home regularly. Their homes aren't here in the Cape, and you can see that if one of these people die in the Cape, they want to be buried in Transkei. So they don't see the Cape, Western Cape as their home.
Right.
So there are those here from the ANC who don't like the weather. They don't like a lot of things about the Cape, and many of them actually leave when they can, because our weather is quite unpleasant as well, especially in winter.
Right. Well, am I right in suggesting that the day after the Western Cape becomes an independent state, you will need a visa to come in to the Western Cape from another part of South Africa, and vice versa?
Not necessarily, because there may be negotiated specific arrangements. Not everyone needs a visa from different countries that have a good relationship with.
Right.
Say, for example, we may have a really great relationship with Namibia, and Namibian citizens may not need a visa, but perhaps it hasn't yet been negotiated with a good reciprocal arrangement with, say, the Republic of South Africa, and that may require a visa for a time. But you can see what happens in Europe. Some countries can come into Switzerland without needing a visa. And on a tourism and so on. But if they want to work, well, now they need a work permit. That's something different. Right. So something like this can be negotiated by the elected representatives.
What about a passport?
For sure.
You'll need a passport. Okay. All right. I'm going to, that wraps up our questions from our side chat. I'm going to close off this live stream by asking a few questions just to get further information. Let's start off by, where can viewers find more information on the movements for independence on the Cape of Good Hope? I'll put that to you, Peter.
Well, the CapeXit.org website, of course, is one of them. We've got a whole range of Facebook pages. Ones that I am an editor for includes the Cape Republic and Cape Independence. And we'll let the other contributors mention theirs, CapeXit, RSA, and so on. I've got the Cape Independence Handbook, which includes contributions from the Cape Party, from CapeXit, from a lawyer, the legal steps to it, and my eyewitness to successful secessions, and the biblical basis for independence and a case for Cape independence, and the examples that we get from history of secessions. So there's a whole range in the Cape Independence Handbook. It's free. It's available online. You can get it on the Frontline Mission SA.org website. It's one of our free PDF books. So one goes to the bottom, free PDF books, download, and that's a free ebook, the Cape Independence Handbook. Otherwise, Facebook page, the Cape Republic, CapeXit, Cape Independence.
Okay, so that's frontlinemissionsa.org.
That's correct. That's my website for the Cape Independence Handbook.
What I'll do is I'll download that document you just told us about, and I'll put it underneath this video as a link so people can just go and download it. Okay, now let me put this question to Phil next. Phil, would you like to just add to how people can find out more information from your organization?
Look, I guess you can get information from us all. If our specific one is www.capeindependence, all one word, .org. So as is fairly simple.
Okay. And are there like documents on there they can download or get further information?
Yeah, look, so I think each of our organisations have stuff about us. Ours, there's obviously information about ourselves and the things that we our positions and so on. We've got quite a lot of all the news articles that we've had written. You'll find under the blog section, under blog and news and blog. Actually, you'll find all of the articles and where they've been published. There's a lot of information in there. We do have a Facebook page as well, which has got about 50,000 followers. I think probably start off at the website, and then there's links to everything from there anyway.
Right. Okay. Des?
Scott, like Dr. Hammond said, our website is CapeXit.org. We have a Facebook page called CapeXit RSA. People must be aware of the fact that CapeXit is in the very final stages of obtaining our trademark certification. That's been applied for over a year ago. So the only legitimate Facebook page for CapeXit is CapeXit RSA. So either there, from there people will find their way to the website at CapeXit.org.
Okay. Now, sorry, Dr. Munn, would you like to add anything to this?
Well, we actually started the National Peace Commission, and I really like to work very, very closely with, obviously, Dr. Peter Hammond and myself.
Right.
We've got a long-standing, working relationship and coalition. But we established the first South African Christian Chamber of Business in July last year, and that is SACOB, www.sacob.co.za. And then in October last year, we established the National Peace Commission, and that was in response to the junk status and the economic recession, and then also to hold the government accountable in terms of the Zondo Commission, Anti-Corruption Tribunal. And I think there's a lot of synergy and where we can actually work together, cross-pollinate ideas, and start working together to take this into other areas and other provinces. Right. So it's great to work together with you guys.
Now, can you just spell SACOB for me? Because it could be an F or B.
It's S, South African Christian Chamber of Business.
B.
SACOB.
SACOB. Okay.
SACCOB.
Okay. .co.za.
Yeah.
Okay, great. All right. Now, what can viewers do practically to help about self-determination, independence and freedom for the Cape of Good Hope? I'll put that question first to Dr. Peter Hammond.
Well, the first thing would be information. My people are destroyed from lack of knowledge. We need to be informed ourselves, so get on the mailing list of the different groups that you support. If you can sign up with CapeXit, add your voice to the mandate. That's assuming you live in the Western Cape and are a registered voter. Go to the Facebook pages, like the Facebook pages, share the posts, share the different, we've got videos such as of the march that's just taken place. Share the videos on your Facebook page or Twitter account, or share it in Telegram, WhatsApp. I'm not sure all the different platforms we've got, but let's use the technology we've got and talk about it to friends and family and neighbors. And of course, overseas supporters are very important, because it'll also come when it comes to time for the Cape of Good Hope to be recognized. Citizens of their different countries, whether we're talking about the Netherlands or Canada or New Zealand or Australia, advocating with their elected representatives to recognize the Cape of Good Hope, open trade agreements and so on, encouraging tourism. So you can help make it effective by sharing the videos, the memes, the Facebook pages, liking, and making sure that you also speak up if you've got a radio phone-in program or podcast, opportunities to be able to organize maybe meetings or interviews for different advocates of Cape Independence and those involved in it. So I think we can all do something. Of course, there's practical things like stickers that you can put in your car, flags that you can fly, T-shirts that one can obtain and wear. It's part of the movement. So the awareness, education is the first step. That's the first thing. So information, intercession, pray for us, investment, if one can help with the marketing, that really helps. Implementation and involvement, perhaps one can volunteer some time, get involved in practical things. Of course, those of us in the Cape, we need people in the Cape for a whole range of things for organizing. And when it actually comes to elections, next year we have municipal elections. Somewhere between July, August, September, we're going to have municipal elections, which is going to be a really important opportunity to support candidates supporting Cape independence, such as the Cape Party. Very important that we help with the groundswell of informing, mobilizing people on the ground to vote. And your impact can be so much greater in municipal elections because a very small percentage of the elected representatives of the actual people who are eligible to vote turn out to vote. I'm told that most people who are eligible to vote either haven't registered to vote or don't turn out to vote. So the more than half of the total electorate say, what difference can my vote make? Which just goes to show how there's probably more people who are eligible to vote who don't vote than those who do. And that puts a heavier responsibility on us to motivate and mobilize. All of us have friends and relatives who haven't even registered to vote. So if you're in the Western Cape in particular, really will help to see what you can do to mobilize that, because I believe, and Des Palm can correct me here, but I believe the only votes that will count in a referendum will be people who are registered with the IEC as residents of the Western Cape who are on an electoral basis to actually cast a vote for a referendum of independence.
Des, over to you.
Scott, yes, I think Dr. Hammond has just put it very well in terms of the support that's required. I think the most important thing for any person out there who finds independence coming across his radar for the first time is to actually go and, I want to call it, educate or equip himself or herself with the knowledge about independence. Go and read what it's about. If you use my friend Google and you type independence in there, you'll probably get 500 and some odd million hits. Go and read what it's about. Equip yourself with the knowledge of what it is about, and then from that perspective of having the knowledge, then start spreading the word. Talk to your family, talk to your neighbor, discuss it. We walk into shops and we hear people moaning about lockdown or whatever, and we say, what do you think about it if the Western Cape can become independent? Immediately there's an interest. You get the proponents that's against it. I've got one thing I always like to say. I would ask a guy, so let's say the Western Cape was independent now. Would you vote to become part of South Africa? And they would look at you like you just smoked something and said, hell no. And then you say, well, then you should support independence. So yes, knowledge is the main thing. Equip yourself with knowledge and then just spread the word.
Absolutely. Yeah. Phil, over to you.
I think Peter and Des have covered everything. So just do something. I think that's the key thing. Right. You can give your mandate, display the symbols, vote for the party to support it. It's important that everybody does something. That's all.
Yeah. And is there anything people can physically do to help Cape independence?
Well, yeah, that's exactly the things we said. It's about building a movement. You have to be visible. If it's a march, the number of people that said, the march was great. So we had a phenomenal turnout, but we had a lot of people that said, look, you know what, can you come and march in Table Bay next time? It's kind of like, no, look, you know what? If we're marching in Stellenbosch and you want independence, get your bum off the couch and go to where the march is. At the end of the day, you can't, and I think probably that is the kind of the apathy. So give your mandate and do something. Be seen, actually. Right. And I think it's important because people are quick to moan and slow to act, and we don't want to be doing. And I think people need to understand that they have power. And you've got to use it. You've got to actually do something, and it has to matter. And we're not going to get independence if everybody's got, look, I would have loved to have marched, but you know what, I had to go shopping, or my wife was doing such and such, or people have to take this on and make like it matters.
Now, Dr. Munns, Peter, is there something that people can do to help your organizations?
What we're in the process of doing at the moment is to establish in 265 municipalities, Scott. I think it's good to have critical thinking and strategic planning, but you need that operational side as well. So that's the first thing that we're in the process of doing now. We're looking at a national program, and the National Peace Commission has really gained a lot of traction. We've gone into 157 municipalities already.
Wow. I think we've lost Peter for the moment. He seems so frozen. Okay. Now, sorry, Des, over to you.
Scott, sorry, yeah, thanks. I just want to add something to what Phil said. It's really a matter of...
This is what people...
Oh, okay. Let's let Peter finish, because he... Sorry, Peter, we lost you for a few seconds there.
Okay, what I was saying is that we don't just have a humanitarian and economic crisis in the country, but we clearly have a leadership and a management crisis. So that is what we're concentrating on first. It's all about infrastructure. And also, I think that if you agree on the same values, so we're using social media all the time. Networking is the greatest.
Oh, we've lost Peter again. Okay. Phil, you said you have to go very soon. I'll just go back to Des, and then I've got one final question for Peter, and I'm going to run that question past you, just so we get this moving. Des, over to you. You were wanting to say something.
Yeah, Scott, I just want to say, like Phil said, I mean, it's really a case of getting up from your backside and doing something. And what I want to use as an example is we've got a gentleman by the name of Rian Brandt who really got up one day and said, you know, saying enough is not good enough anymore. And he's actually doing what we call the CapeXit 1.6 million awareness cycle tour. Right. Where he's getting on his bicycle and he's cycling from Plettenberg Bay up to Lambert's Bay, which is over 1,000 kilometers over a stretch of 19 days. Now, that to me is a typical example of somebody that's got the passion for independence and that's getting up, getting off his butt and doing something.
Right. Now, the one last question I have is I'm going to start off with Peter. And Peter, at the very end of this live stream, would you mind saying a prayer? Thank you. I've had several people who've asked if you wouldn't mind doing that. Now, okay, so the final question I have for the group, and I see that Peter Munns has dropped out. I think he's lost his internet. The final question is, what lies immediately ahead in your plans?
Well, bear in mind that we've got municipal elections coming up next year, possibly as early as July, maybe as late as September, October. And so getting people registered to vote, who are eligible, and getting people educated so that we get mandates to mobilize people on that election. That's part of it. Of course, the drive for getting enough votes and educate people for the referendum is important, but how important it's going to be to get some people dedicated to independence elected on the municipal levels to be bringing it up into city council level and the other different municipalities throughout the Western Cape. That's something ahead. That's a very helpful, tangible mobilization goal where they won't be able to ignore us, where we will have elected representatives speaking up for these concerns. So obviously education is the number one task, but also getting people motivated to get registered to vote. There's a lot of young people who haven't bothered to register to vote at all because they're so disenchanted. So I think giving people hope and giving people a vision, which is why the march on Saturday is just another good example of how encouraging people to see, wow, we're not alone. The 7,000 haven't bowed the knee to Baal and so on. So immediately ahead, more community radio stations, interviews, podcast, Skype interviews such as with yourself, getting the word out, getting more people to put the CapeXit stickers on their buckies, to fly the flag, to be able to mobilize, get more people signed up with the CapeXit Independence March for the referendum. These are some of the things that we all are mobilizing for, I think. So immediately ahead, I've got camps and courses planned. We're actually running a camp in Hammond from the 4th to the 11th of January. So that's what's immediately ahead for myself.
Okay, how did people actually sign up for the course?
For our camp, if they go on the Frontline Mission SA.org website, they'll find the Biblical Worldview Summit, Hermanus, 4th to the 11th of January. And on there, it's got the videos, the links, the info, application form, and all of that. And of course, if people want to sign up for the referendum, that's on the CapeXit.org website.
Yeah, exactly. Now, Phil, over to you. I know you've got to get moving. Do you want to just respond to that question, just to wrap up for yourself?
Sure. Yeah. Look, I think that for us, there's probably three things that we want to focus on, which are the things that we always focus on: media and getting and continuing to get stories in the media so that people become engaged and there's a debate around it. Visibility, which we're about to open our mobile shop or e-shop, which will have sort of car socks and flags and stuff, and the independence masks that you saw at the rally. And we'll almost certainly start working on the next March too, which is all part of the visibility campaign. And then all of those things then actually put us in a position to do our primary role, which is then to apply political pressure behind the scenes. So for example, the march at the end of it, we handed over a petition to the DA. We will be shortly talking to the DA again, as we do on a fairly regular basis, and other political parties too. We're talking to the Cape Coloured Congress. We talk to the Freedom Front. But particularly, obviously, we've said our policy is to the DA as the government, and we will use those pressures. Each time there's a pressure point, we'll now go back and say, well, look there, this is what happened with the march, and what now? So yeah, they're the thing: media visibility and then political pressure.
Right. Now, just before I go to you, Des, I just want to say that I'll be sending you all the link to this live stream, and feel free to share it on Facebook wherever you want to. I think we covered a lot of ground. Now, Des, over to you.
Scott, our immediate future is building awareness, and let me first say again, thanks to yourself. Thanks for covering the march on Saturday. Thanks for giving us the opportunity again to spend some time on your platform. Building awareness, we will carry on with that. We've had a couple of workshops. We have a couple of what we would like to call house meetings, where 8 or 10 or 12 people get together. We're going to speak to them and share some thoughts and ideas. So the crux of the thing is we have to keep on building the awareness, and then try and spread out like we had exposure in the media in terms of articles and letters.
Yeah.
And that is, we'll simply, I think up to now we've been very successful, and we just got to build on that success.
Right. Now, I just want to shout out Michelle Mullard, who was our citizen reporter at that march on Saturday. She did a fantastic job. All right.
Yeah,
I just want to...
sorry, Scott,
Yeah.
I suppose I can't use the S word, eh?
Which word is that?
When she stood next to myself and Warren.
Oh, yeah.
She questioned the altitude.
That was quite a marathon live stream. She did fantastically well.
It was absolutely. We appreciate that.
I just want to start by thanking the moderators for doing the fantastic job you do. I saw we had a few trolls coming through during the live stream, and thank you for managing those. Thank you for everybody who's watched the video. I've certainly learnt a lot, and I think independence is well on its way in the Western Cape. I think it's not a question of when, it's a question of, not a question of if, it's a question of when. I think that's the only question left. So thank you, and please share this video link with your friends and family, and let people know what the heck is going on in the Western Cape, because this is the future. And I want to thank our guests, Dr. Peter Munns, who I think has lost his internet connection. His involvement is always very, very valuable. Thank you, Phil. Great to have you on. And Des, great to have you on as well. And Dr. Hammond, Peter, thank you so much once again. Your knowledge is quite extraordinary. And what I'm going to do now is ask if you wouldn't mind closing this live stream for us in prayer.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Scott. Thank you, everyone. Let's pray. Lord God, we want to thank you that at all times we can turn to you for wisdom, for grace, for strength. We know that you are the one who raises up nations and you bring down kings, and we turn to you who control the destiny of nations and peoples. We pray, Lord God, that you may have mercy upon us. You know the evils that have taken part, and you know, Lord God, the evils we have tolerated, even in our own hearts, and we need mercy from you. We need to humble ourselves and pray and seek your face and turn from our wicked ways. And we thank you, Lord, that when we do that, that you've promised to forgive us and to heal our land. And we ask, Lord, that you would hear our prayer. Lord, have mercy upon us. Have mercy upon the people of the Cape of Good Hope. In fact, on all the different peoples of South Africa, as we consider the kingdom of Zululand and many others who are also considering independence. Lord, grant us all grace and wisdom to know how to do this in a wise way. May you be our shield, our fortress, our strong deliverer. May you protect our hearts and our minds, that we will not be discouraged or distracted or in any way defeated by those who are the naysayers and the critics, those who've got a ministry of criticism and a gift of discouragement. Lord, free us from false brethren and from traitors and from infiltrators and from agent provocateurs who may be seeking to undermine this movement for faith and freedom. So, Lord God, we pray, give us wisdom, give us discernment. Help us, Lord God, to be faithful to you, to be steadfast in studying your word and seeking to apply your lordship to all areas of life. Lord God, it is our prayer that the people of the Western Cape may go free, and not just the Western Cape, but all the Cape. And we know we must start where we are and step by step. We pray, Lord God, help us not to be obstacles, not to be part of the problem, but part of the solution. Help us, Lord, to be channels of your mercy and grace to those who need it. Help us to love our neighbor and to do to others we'd want to be done unto ourselves. Lord, as we seek to obey your teachings, as we seek to be good neighbors, as we seek to be part of the solution, not cursing the darkness, but lighting a candle and being part of those who improvise and adapt and seek solutions to problems. We pray, Lord, that you'd give us wisdom and insight from your word, and that you'd mercifully and graciously lead us by your Holy Spirit and guide us in our conscience and our dealings with one another. Help us to be gracious, and help us, Lord God, to be steadfast, persevering, and persistent, and not to give up until we have seen the victory, a free and independent Cape of Good Hope. Guide us, we pray. Bless this initiative. Have mercy upon us. Thank you, Lord God, for every listener. Thank you for every intercessor and supporter. Thank you for every activist. Thank you for those who have been doing so much work in this cause. We pray for Jack Miller and the Cape Party. We pray for Des Palm and CapeXit. We pray for Phil Craig and the Cape Independence Action Group. We pray for Hein Marks and ULA. We pray for the Sovereign State of Good Hope and USAF and Zuidland and all the different groups that are seeking to work for freedom, independence, self-determination, and justice in the Cape. May you have mercy upon us all. May you help us, Lord God, to be part of the constructive solution and the work for the future. And we ask, Lord, for the sake of future generations, that you'd be pleased to grant us freedom, justice, prosperity in a free and independent Cape of Good Hope. We pray it in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you very much, Peter. All right, guys.
Thank you, Scott.
It's been a fabulous live stream. Thank you. And as I say, in a short while, I'll send you the link so you can send that out to your members. It'll probably take about half an hour to actually fully percolate, because YouTube have got to process it and so on. But the side chat will be there, so you can have a look at what happened. I would also remind you that Loving Life is moving to its own platform called lovinglifetv.com. Register on that, and I'm actually putting up my first video today, or it'll be tomorrow your time, which was pulled down by YouTube because it went against their censorship laws, and it's about the vaccine, and I think you'll find it very, very disturbing and very, very interesting. All right, with that, I'm going to shut down the live stream. I'll keep the side chat open for a short while so that people
sorry,
can...
could you just give us again that Loving Life?
Yeah, Loving Life TV. That's a television. LovingLifeTV.com.
Okay, and that's all one word.
Yeah, it's all one word, yeah.
LovingLifeTV.com.
.com.
Thank you.
Okay then. Cheers, guys. Take care.
Thanks so much for organising this, Scott.
Oh, you're
Thank you,
very
Des.
welcome.
Thank you.
You're always
Thanks for
welcome. And
coming.
look, let Marlena know if something's happening, and we'll get you guys back.
Thanks,
Excellent.
Scott. Appreciate it.
Okay.
Thank you.